بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. Inshallah tabaraka wa ta'ala, we welcome you to this special Sunday edition of the Roundtable. And tonight we're going to talk with our beloved Imam Dawood Walid and Ustav Shakir Williams on an important subject on the need for communal rectification and to address issues that we always talk about on the Black Imams Roundtable and in our gatherings. But tonight, our brother Shakir has written a new book that goes extensively to try to give us an understanding and a solution to this issue. And he is well qualified in terms of experience and education to address the topic. And as you know, Imam Dawood, who's a Black Muslim justice fighter, who's always on the front lines, not only for Black Muslims, but for Muslims in general. But to have him as from us is always a joy. And he's always engaged in these issues. So we welcome you. We ask all of you to do three things before we begin. Number one, like this session. Number two, please share so we can spread it as fast as possible. And number three, which is really should be number one, please make dua quickly that Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala would give us tawfiq to give information that will make a change in our lives and in our community and build us and develop us and strengthen us by the status of Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So we're going to get right to it, and I'm going to pass it to Imam Dawood, and he can set everything up. Please remember to share, inshallah. Barakallahu bikum. Imam Dawood.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيبنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. Beloved brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum, and belated Eid Mubarak to all of you who are watching. And may Allah Azza wa Jal accept all of your siyam, all of your qiyam, all of your tilawatul Quran from the blessed month of Ramadan. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us the ability to be able to fast the 6 days of Shawwal that are recommended during this Islamic month. So I contacted our beloved Imam Amin, may Allah preserve him, regarding this discussion after having a series of conversations with one of our good friends, Dr. Bilal Ware, and also Ustad Shaka, may Allah preserve both of them. And Dr. Ware was supposed to have been, he was originally scheduled to be on here this evening, and he sends his regrets. There was a family issue that popped off that blocked him from attending. So please make dua for him and for his son. But nonetheless, we're still here, and this is a discussion that we've had, but really the background of the discussion or the immediate situation that sparked us wanting to have this discussion is, of course, the shooting that made national news that took place in Philadelphia at the Eid Festival outside of the Philadelphia Masjid at the area of Sister Claire Muhammad Square, in which led to 5 arrests, 3 people shot, and what we later found to be Muslim on Muslim violence of young men. Now, I want my brother Ustad Shakir to do most of the talking this evening. Of course, I will participate, but there's a couple of points I'd like to make just from the onset regarding this issue, but the broader issue, right? And we have an issue, and in Black America, that is a serious emergency. And I think that most of us could agree that we have equally a very serious emergency issue inside the Muslim community of Black folks. So when I'm talking about Black folks, let me be very specific. I'm talking about the descendants of the enslaved Africans brought here to the Western Hemisphere. Okay, we know Nigerians have their problems. We know that Malians have their problems, and Somalis and Sudanese have their problems. I'm speaking about specifically our problems that are particular to this land that we live in. In regards to the broader issues of Black America, we are a product of that. And all of the dysfunctions and pathologies that went inside the Black community, those affect us as Muslims who are Black in various ways. Either affects us as a community because of our family members who aren't Muslims that are afflicted by certain issues, the neighborhoods that we live in, especially if we live in majority African American or urban environments, right, affect us. And then us being Black folks and the psychology and the issues to our collective psyche that affect us as Muslims that just didn't go away just because we declared Shahadatain, whether we converted or revert to Islam or whether we were born inside of Muslim families. This is one. And this is something that we have to avoid reductionism, right? There are multiple different factors to this issue and to this problem. It's not one factor issue. And I'm really looking forward to the summit that Imam Amin and Masjid Muhammad is sponsoring in July, in which leaders are going to be coming together so that we can really have some serious, candid discussion about how we deal with some specifics regarding this issue that afflicts us. The second thing is Black folks in particular, and who are Muslims. So Philadelphia has like its very unique history, right? But there's also some issues that transcend Philadelphia. But one thing is that we have to be honest. So for instance, I heard someone speak in the community recently and was trying to blame the problems or the issues of Philadelphia on recent converts. And I think that this is a severe case of denial. There is a history and a culture of ninjaism in our community as Black folks or Muslims, and Philadelphia is one of the preeminent places, Philly and Newark in particular, right? Ustad Shakir and I were personal friends with brother Samuel Bea, aka Sam Christensen, who was the captain during the nation, who was the leader of the Black Mafia. We know that the community that came out of there, that one of the imams, not mention his name, probably most of you know who it is, was involved with the mafia and was doing deals inside the community and got federally indicted. I remember the time periods of at least 32 years ago, and how I remember is Jazzy Jeff and Fresh Prince song "Summertime" was out. So before some of y'all were even born, I was kicking it with some guys and drove up to Philly to meet up with some guys that I was kicking it with. We're around Germantown area. Guy with a big beard, pants legs rolled up, 32, 33 years old, selling dust in Germantown area, talking about Juma Day special. If you buy 3 bags, you get the third bag off half price. You can get 3 for $25. That was like 32 years ago, 33 years ago, right? So realistically, and then this goes beyond this. We have in my town, in the city of Detroit, youth doing drill music, born and raised Muslim, raised in the tariqah, went overseas even some to study Quran. They have a wird. They were given a wird by the sheikh, right? Catching cases, brawl at the Eid festivities at the roller skating rink on more than one occasion. People carrying guns, just no one getting shot, right? In the city of Detroit, where Ustaz Shakir is originally from, where I'm from, right? Muslims who are still claiming their set, born and raised Muslim. Muslims claiming O-Block. Muslims claiming Crenshaw Mafia. 2 of the biggest Muslims in the rap game, Kevin Gates and Lil Durk, not only have homicidal rap, suicidal rap, right? And so this issue of how this has become acceptable within our community, this is something that goes beyond whether someone has the right quote unquote akida or not. This is something that goes beyond just fikr or just understanding of knowing arkanul iman properly, right? And I believe, if I turn over, there's two aspects that we have to deal with outside of economics, right? Outside of having proper belief, right? Because our people were poor less economically 100 years ago, 75 years ago, and we weren't as savage or killing each other back then the way that we do now, right? At one point around World War II, Black folks had a higher marriage rate and a higher rate of children born in wedlock than white folks. In Detroit, 8 out of 10 Black children are born from zina, and we have Muslims who are giving birth to Muslim children from zina in my town. And it's become socially acceptable, right? But beyond, so one thing we need to deal with is that the issue of self-hate that we have to address and be honest about. Do we really love ourselves haqiqatan as a people? We can say it with our tongues of Black Lives Matter. Do Black lives really matter to Black people? This is a question we need to istifham. This is like a real question we have to ask ourselves, right? Practically speaking, in action, right? Not just something al-aqli, al-amali, not just theoretically, in action. And then the other thing that we need to ask ourselves, besides the issue of self-hate, are we really dealing with this issue? Is have we replaced in our understanding of practice of Islam, have we replaced the white man for the desert Arab? For a type of Islam that's not even serving them properly in their lands, in their dysfunctional countries, in their countries that are swimming with dhulm and corruption and jar and el jarima, right? Where oppression is the culture, corruption is the culture, right? Have we, in a sense, trying to get away from the white man, replace the white man with the Arab? Have we replaced the white man with the Pakistani? Right? So these are 2 things I want to throw out, because I believe that all of these things, yes, proper belief is very important. Yes, having access to wealth and pooling our wealth, this is very important, right? But there's some other things, right? And it's not just all on slavery, because I believe, like my grandfather, he turns 98 in October. I believe that my grandfather's generation, with the wrong Aqidah as Christians, were socially thriving and carried themselves in a much more dignified way than we as Black folks do in the year 2024 all throughout the United States of America, right? And this was during Jim Crow, right? So with that, I'm going to pass the microphone over to Ustad Shaka. I said more than what I planned on saying. Cop the brother's book, The Enemy Within. I'm going to share the link in the chat, inshallah. Tafadl, Sidi.
Alhamdulillah. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. I wanted to there's a lot obviously to address and unpack, but I wanted to recite this famous ayah from Surah An-Nisa where Allah Azza wa Jalla says, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, wa ma lakum la tuqatiluna fi sabilillahi wa mustad'afina min ar-rijali wan nisa'i والولدان الذين يقولون ربنا أخرجنا من هذه القرية الظالم أهلها واجعل لنا من لدنك وليا واجعل لنا من لدنك نصيرا. And what is with you that you do not fight in the way of Allah and in the way of the mustadafin, from amongst the men, the women, and the children, those who say, our Lord, remove us from this land whose occupants are oppressors, and make for us and appoint for us from yourself a wali, or someone who will look out for our affairs, and make for us from yourself a helper who will give us victory. But the key word I want to focus on here is the mustadafin. And so obviously we're familiar with American history. We should anyway, in terms of the historical odysseys of Black Americans, not just with slavery, but throughout the periods of Jim Crow, legalized segregation, etc. The point I'm getting at is that Black Americans were made the mustadafin of the United States historically. And, you know, many of us Muslims, we read these ayat of Quran and we see the mustadafin, and we're still thinking about the early Muslims in Mecca. And one of our problems is not being able to calibrate verses of the Quran and apply them to our own condition. And so what our people experience in this country, we didn't just experience racism. We experienced isti'fadin, right? So isti'fadin is the 10th form of the verb da'afa or da'afa, means he weakened. And so in the 10th form, the verb takes on a request or a desire or an intention. So like ghafara means he forgave. Istaghfara means he sought forgiveness. So istadafa means he desired to weaken a people. He wanted to weaken them. His intention was to weaken them. And so the mustadafin are the ones who receive the action. And so Black people are the mustadafin of America. That what we have experienced in this country has been a deliberate marginalization by a myriad of forces. And throughout America, Black Americans now are talking about the economic legacies of white supremacy or so-called white supremacy, racism, the political and social ramifications, but very rarely do we talk about the emotional and psychological ramifications of racism, particularly how it encourages people to hate themselves. And not only to hate themselves, but to actively invest in their own dehumanization, to actively participate in their own degradation and their own devaluation as a people. And this is one of the most insidious aspects of oppression, right? And, you know, I always wondered years ago, like when, you know, Allah says in the Quran, al-fitnatu ashaddu min al-qatl, al-fitnatu akbaru min al-qatl, that fitna is greater than murder and fitna is worse than murder. And I was like, well, how can something be worse than murder? And the reason is Fitna, you die 1,000 deaths over and over and over again, and it's more agonizing. And so this issue of this deep-seated self-hatred that we as Black Americans have, and how we invest in our own devaluation just with language. I mean, there's no other ethnic group in this country that uses the racist language against themselves the way that we do, right? So, you know, during World War II, the Nazi regime referred to Jews in Europe as Untermenschen. But we don't hear Jewish men using the language of the Nazis against their own women, right? Jewish men don't call Jewish women Untermenschen bees and Untermenschen hoes. The way that we use the language of our enemies against ourselves. So I guarantee you, before this shooting happened the other day in Philly, before all of the shootings that happen across America, what comes before the shooting is the language of devaluation. That's what precedes the shooting. That's what precedes the violence, right? Nigga, you ain't getting no money. Nigga, you ain't pulling no bees. You ain't pulling no hoes, right? This comes before the shooting, right? Making videos about each other on TikTok, right? And no other group does this the way that we do. So this issue, this deep-seated issue of investing in our own self-hatred. And Muslims do it the same. We do it the same thing. I mean, we do the same thing, right? We don't call our women, bitch. We call them ooks and bits. But it means the same thing, right? Because we say it with such hatred. Hey, Imam Dawood, you married to that sister? No, I can't admit that bit, right? We say it with such hatred. Imam, you still with that sister Khadijah? No, that ook didn't want no deen. That ook wasn't deen and so it's the same mentality.
Assalamu alaikum. Before you get me in trouble, I ain't with no sister named Khadijah.
But it's the same. It's the same mentality, right? You not on the deen. You ain't on the sunnah. You ain't got no knowledge. But if you were from Egypt, you would have knowledge. But because you're a Black American, you couldn't have knowledge, right? So this deep-seated self-hatred that is deeply rooted in our culture, this has to be addressed. And why we're so violent with each other. I mean, there's so many layers to it. I mean, as I mentioned before, I came to Al-Islam, through a number of people, but Malcolm X, El Hajj Malik Shabazz was the catalyst for me. And, I remember going to programs at Howard, and Muslims were saying Malcolm X was not on the deen. Malcolm X didn't know Islam, right? He was into nationalism, right? And so when you try to help Black people, you're into nationalism. But when you're the messenger of Allah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and you identify as an Arab, you're not a nationalist. When you're the prophet Isa bin Maryam, and you identify with the Bani Israel, you couldn't be a nationalist, right? All throughout the Quran, Allah says, "Wa ila al-'ad akhahum Hud, wa ila Thamud akhahum Salih, ya qawmi ibudullah." Over and over and over again, Allah puts the prophets with their people. But when it comes to us, oh no, I'm not Black, I'm not African American, I'm just Muslim, right? So this is an extension of self-hatred, but this is one of the reasons why Black American Muslims have not been able to formulate strategies that are specific and endemic to our people, right? And as Imam Dawood mentioned earlier, one of the elements in my book, and obviously throughout this discussion, I'll be referring back into my book, is that I talk about the Moynihan Report. And there was this famous report where an Irish senator who was from New York, his family actually lived out west, but they moved to New York. And he came up with a very controversial report in 1965 entitled The Moynihan Report, The Negro Family, A Case for National Action. And he talked about the growing prevalence of female-headed households in the Black community. Now, Daniel Patrick Moynihan's father abandoned their family and left them. And so Daniel Moynihan's analysis was very personalized because his father had left him. But he was doing an analysis of this growing problem within Black American or Negro families, as we would call them, Black American communities of female-headed households. And so when he began his report, or when he published his report in 1965, the rate of female-headed households within Black American communities was 25%. And this was up from 20% in 1960. As a time of this discussion that we're having now, it's more than 70%, all throughout America on average. And in some of our communities, it's 80% or more. And so one of our problems, these young men and who did the shooting, who were involved in this, and other young men across the country, it'd be interesting to see where their fathers are and the impact of single female-headed households on their community, and the reasons why we got here with female-headed households, which I'll talk about a little later.
Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. I see that Imam Amin stepped away for a moment, beloved brother, but very thorough analysis and comments that you made, at least to start off, in regards to the topic. But I want to go back to something that you really didn't touch on that I made reference to, and that is this issue of us as Muslims who are Black wanting to sometimes reduce our problems in regards to people not having the proper creed.
I
want you to touch on that. Reason being is that, and I mentioned Detroit for a reason to show that Chicago's not, there's a difference to Philadelphia or some of these rappers, right?
Yeah.
Because as I mentioned, the people that were doing this in Detroit, none of them were Wahhabis, right? So we want to blame everything on Wahhabism. Right. These are people who are born, and they aren't converts. They're born and raised with parents in Tariqa.
Yeah.
Some of them their parents have bay'at to a sheikh.
Yeah.
Or father has bay'at to a sheikh.
Yeah.
Right. And but there's something that's universal that goes around communities, be it so-called Sufi communities, so-called Salafi communities. People come out of Warfni Muhammad's community. My good friend Imam Suleiman Hamid, I know within the past few years, the past 5 years, how many janazas he's done of Muslims who are rappers that got murdered in Atlanta. He's a resident imam of Atlanta Masjid of El Islam, right? They ain't no Wahhabi spot.
Right.
Wahhabism ain't predominant in Atlanta at all. Right. So I want to get to that, because when we had the so-called wrong Aqidah in the nation, we seem to be acting a little bit more civilized and disciplined. When we had the wrong Aqidah in the Black church.
Yeah.
Right. So I want to mention that, because creed matters, but we can't just scapegoat everything and start off to say that all of our problems as Black Muslims is because we got the wrong creed. I think this is overly reductionist.
Well, for me, one of the problems, and I don't mean to be offensive to people, but as Imam Amin, we speak straight. one of my issues personally, and this is just me personally, is the usage of the word Aqidah. The word Aqidah doesn't appear in the book of Allah. The verb Aqidah does, but the verb Aqidah, the word Aqidah itself does not appear in the book of Allah. And the Messenger of Allah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, never used this word. But what does appear in the book of Allah, all throughout the book of Allah, is the word millah. And Muslims don't even use the word millah. We don't even use the word millah. Now, why do I mention that? Because millah is not only creed, but it's how you see the world. It's how you see yourself in the world. It's your behavior, your philosophy, your epistemology that structures your life. And so the millah of Ibrahim, not the Aqidah of Ibrahim, but the millah of Ibrahim was such that his life was structured on La ilaha illallah Muhammadur, La ilaha illallah Ibrahim Rasulullah, right? La ilaha illallah. This is consistent. What has happened is that many of us who've gone to study, we've learned theology, but we haven't learned millah, right? We haven't, in other words, when we study the Qasas al-Anbiya, you see clearly that the issues that people had with Hud, with Lut, with Shu'aib, it was not based on their creed. It was based on their millah, because Shu'aib came with a different economic philosophy. That was the issue they had with Shu'aib. They didn't care how long Shu'aib's beard was. They were mad at Shu'aib because he wanted to establish economic justice in the land. He wanted to bring a different millah, not Aqidah, but a different millah. And so many of our people are using the wrong language. As Christians, my mom, before she accepted Islam, she had the wrong belief, but her behavior was actually along the lines of the correct millah in terms of her morality. She didn't drink, she didn't smoke, she didn't curse, she was respectful, she was modest. And this was her idea of living close to biblical texts, the teachings of the prophet. Obviously she believed that Isa was son of Allah. Yes, Imam.
I want to put a pin in there for me. I got to go pray, but I want to return back and add to, and y'all finish, keep going. I want to add to this topic in this area particularly, so we can have we can flush it out a little bit more. Mm-hmm. But please go on. But I got to go pray. So I don't want to come back after, because y'all gonna go for a minute. Yeah. But this particular issue, in terms of words and istilahat, right? I want to really flush that out a little bit, because sometimes words, when used out of their context, can be totally misunderstood. So once we put words in their context, we should be able to clarify and still get our points across, So I'm going to come back. I'm going to put a pin in there, but continue, and I'll come back. Barakallahu bikum.
So I think with older Christians who tried to live according to the Bible, members of the Nation of Islam who they didn't have the right belief, but they sought to model their behavior according to what they thought was Islam as best they could. We as Sunni, we as members, so-called, again, and I don't necessarily subscribe to these terms, but those of us who consider ourselves Sunni Muslims, Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, etc., what have you, Orthodox Muslims, we almost have more of a Christianized approach to al-Islam, in the sense that, like many Christians say that I'm saved, We say have the right Aqidah, but you don't have to modify your character. And it's almost like it's almost like a Christian type of idea regarding al-Islam, is that as long as you have the correct belief, you know, Allah's Ghafur Rahim, Allah forgives everything. If you have the right belief, eventually you will come out of Jannah. This is very dangerous. This can be very dangerous because it will give license to criminal, sinful behavior under the notion that Allah will forgive Yeah, Allah is Ghafur Rahim, but he's also Shadidul Iqab, he's also Sariul Hisab, and he's also Azizun Dhun Tikam.
Thank you, beloved. So as we wait back for Imam Amin and to flesh that out, and it's not to, in my comment, even asking that question or bringing it up, is not to diminish the importance of having correct belief, right? And for those who know me and what I talk about, I'm always speaking about or speaking against tajsim and tashbih or anthropomorphism, right? And how that is totally not correct belief and goes against Tawheed. There's no doubt about it. But I think what Ustad Shaker is touching on, and I know this based upon our discussions, is many times we get so caught up into philosophical discussions as Muslims that the practical application in our personal conduct, much less how it manifests in our community, this is something that we have to work on more. Obviously, we know that the deen in of itself, there are three sciences that are sacred. We have al-Iman, which constitutes proper belief, and this is per Hadith Jibril alayhi salam. We have al-Islam, which represents proper ahkam or the rulings, in regards to fiqh ibadat. And then we also have al-Ihsan, worshiping Allah as if we can see Allah. But if you not see Allah, know that Allah sees you. And this relates to inward directness towards Allah and our spiritual purification that brings about ethical behavior, which we could call this tazkiyah, a tazkiyah to nafs. We can call it tahdhiba to nufus, or we can call it tasawwuf, a tasawwuf as Sunni, whatever term that we prefer to use, right? In regards to these three. So it's not to diminish that. But again, and I say this point as a reason, and this is something for us to really think and deeply contemplate, right? In regards to when we had the wrong belief in the nation, our families were more together. We carried ourselves more dignified. We even had more collective economics in our community, right? When we had the wrong belief or the wrong Aqidah, right? And I can even go back and saying that amongst some of our people who were Christians, right? So then what is it that we have to talk about or we have to investigate, including those of us who say that we have the proper belief? Like we're not mujassima. We don't believe that Allah is up in the sky. We don't believe that Allah has a literal hand, hakiki, we don't treat Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab like a prophet, right? But what is it? What is it that's going on with us in our communities that we need to really think about and rectify beyond just simply ta'lim? And one of the interesting things, and I've mentioned this, and I learned this from one of my teachers, and Ustad Shaker and I were talking about this yesterday. And this formula is mentioned in more than one place in the Quran. For instance, we'll use Surah Al-Jum'ah, the second ayah, as an example. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, Huwa alladhi ba'atha fi ummiyin rasulan minhum yatslu alayhim ayatihi wa yuzakkihim wa yu'allimuhum al-kitaba wal hikmah wa in kanu min qablu lafi dalalin mubin. It is He, Allah, who sent His messenger, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, from the unlettered people. And then what's the sequence? To rehearse to them His signs, And his signs just don't simply mean ayatul Qur'aniyah. The signs in the creation, the signs are in us, right? And to purify them by yuzakki him. And then what? And then to teach them the book and the wisdom. So the sequence of this is very important, because a group of people who have self-hate and don't know themselves, and a group of people who have not continuously going through the process of purging themselves from the culture of criminality, from the culture of ignorance that became normalized in Jahiliyyah, and then just go and think that they're going to delve into into deep theology. That's actually going outside the sequence of even how the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam even dealt with the desert Arabs. Right. This is my argument, you know, and this is the tartib of how these ayat are in the Quran. And we're told by one of my teachers said this, that let's say that the Quran, which is divine revelation, it is like pure water. We make this analogy because the Quran is the essence of the deen. This is our infallible source, right? The book with no doubt. And you see someone dying of thirst, and that person asks for a drink, and you give them a cup, and you pour that pure water in. But inside that cup, you were using that cup to clean out a stopped up toilet. And then didn't wash it. So you have fecal matter in there. There's some leftover residue at a little drop of maybe some urine that didn't get out. Then you pour that water into that dirty glass cup, and you give it to that thirsty person. You're going to make that person sick. May end up even getting dysentery. Right? So there's a process, right, that we have to go to and really drill down on this issue in regards to self-hate and this issue of tashabbuh, of imitation, of how many of us as Muslims seek to imitate many of the ways of our people that are still in Jahiliyyah in the name of keeping it real or keeping it a buck or holding on to our culture, right? When some of it really isn't black culture, it's ninja culture, right? And it's like what Chris Rock said years ago, about 20 years ago. There's a civil war going on between black people and ninjas, and the ninjas are winning. And we need to really be honest about that.
Yeah, you know, again, if I may reference, you know, El Hajj Malik Shabazz, Malcolm X rahimahullah, is that Islam for him and others who were influenced by him was reformative and transformative, right? It was reformative. It reformed qualities that already existed, but it was transformative in terms of it eliminated negative qualities and brought negative characteristics and brought better qualities. These currents of Islam that pervaded our community, they were not reformative or transformative at all. They were socially myopic. They were economically restrictive because, you know, we legitimized poverty. We spoke against education. I mean, you know, we spoke against a greater involvement in the society. And so we're reaping the benefits. I mean, you know, we're reaping the harvest of these various currents that were not designed to address our deep-seated issues. And the criminal behavior, again, you know, well, Allah's Ghafur Rahim, right? We never say Allah is Azizun Dhun Tikam. We don't say that. We just say Allah is Ghafur Rahim, right? We never say Allah.
Translate that for the audience, because everyone doesn't understand those terms.
Right. So we never say that Allah is severe, and I mean that He's mighty and He's the Lord of revenge and retribution. We never say that he's swift in bringing things to account. We never say, inna adhabi lashadid, right? Certainly my punishment is extremely severe. We just say inna Allah ghafur rahim. And that allows us to continue with criminal behavior. And well, akhi, if you have an ounce weight of iman, even if you have to go to Jannah, eventually you come out. Like, man, who would want to go to Jannah for 5 seconds? So this is how.
You mean who wants to go to hellfire for 5 seconds?
Yeah, excuse me, astaghfirullah. Who would want to go to the Jahannam for 5 seconds? But this is how crazy we are. Well, yeah, Aki, I know I owe you that $500, but you might have to get it on the Yom Kippur. I mean, just absurd. Again, Negroes. I mean, brother, absurd, just insane. Yeah, you might have to get that on the Yom Kippur. Like,
brother, I had someone owe me some money and told me, oh yeah, he just chalk it up as sadaqah, Allah will reward you. I'm like, that wasn't my intention, ninja. I let you borrow that money.
Yeah,
and you're talking about chalk it up as, oh yeah, just chalk it up as sadaqah, like I want my $1,200 back.
Right,
the intention wasn't sadaqah.
It was a brother I knew, Ahmed Ali. He was from the nation. He was from number 25, so he wasn't no joke. He said a brother did that to him one time. Well, Aki, you a good brother. He like, look, brother, I ain't no blankety blank good brother. Pay me my money. Don't run that game on me. That I'm a good brother and Allah gonna bless you. He like, man, pay me my money. But again, this is the slick Negro ninja, right? God, that we trivialize ayat of Quran. And we trivialize the day of all days. We trivialize it with ninja-isms and Negroisms. Yeah. Welcome back, Imam. Alhamdulillah. Yeah.
I'm gonna be in listening mode because I saw y'all got into some fiery things. I'm looking at the comments, but I want to say this, and then I will talk about, because I would like us all to read your book. That's number one. So let me put that up. Being an imam, I'm like a real imam. So I have a masjid with people. I gotta go pray. I'm not just the internet imam, like real with real others in the. Yo, Ak, you on that computer? You better pray, Ak.
Right. That brother ain't on no
deen. Gonna get you in Jannah, right?
Yeah. That brother ain't on no deen, Ak. I knew he wasn't on no deen, Ak. Right.
But so I did put the book up. Let me put it again, because I believe we all have something to offer for these issues we're talking about. We all have solutions, and our teachers used to say to us, if you cannot do all of a thing, do not leave off all of that thing. If you cannot do all of a thing, do not leave off all of that thing. And in other way, do your part. And I believe we have to realize that each of us have a part, and we have to be wise enough to recognize who has what part. So we all have a part, and we have to be wise enough to say who has what part. So if we're going to solve all the things we're beginning to recognize and uncover in our own self, then we got to know what surgeon for what disease in our community. And we have to be humble enough to leave certain surgeries to certain people once we identify them. And I'm saying that for a reason. One of the things that we have in our community is our minds can be too narrow and not take in the vastness of our skill sets. And because of that, we stay in the same condition, right? That's a part of hating ourselves, as if we only have one hand. We have two, and we have feet, and we have legs, right? And eyes and ears, and all of these different parts function to help the body achieve its objectives. But sometimes we leave that out, and we can't compartmentalize all these different aspects. I'm being long-winded to say, when we listen for the person's expertise. If you find that they're in an area that's not their expertise, don't shut down from their expertise. Do you follow my point? That's like a message for all of us. Still stay tuned in and learn to extract benefit, even when there are some areas that you may not agree with. Because maybe those areas someone else is better at. Let them do that. But in this area, that person may be the best one among us, or among the best, or the beneficial ones. I said all that to say, because I was reading comments, be patient with each other. Right? Let's hear each other out. Let's benefit from each other, and then we dialogue. And I got to finish reading to talk what I wanted to say when I left. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, just one quick comment, and Jazakallah khairan, Imam, for your comment. May Allah bless you. Just to clarify, I know that no one says that Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab is a prophet in the literal sense, right? What I was referring to is making all of his statements and all of his opinions, including those which all of the ulama before disagreed with or never or were refuted later, including his own brother, is taking those opinions as if he is ma'soom, as if he's infallible. Like usul al-thalatha is infallible. If you disagree with usul al-thalatha, your tawheed ain't correct. That's what I meant. So just for clarification purposes, I saw it someone in the comments that no one believes that Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab is a prophet. Yeah, not literally, but how people talk about him sometimes, or his books, they treat it as if you violate the core tenets of Islam if you don't believe or agree with usul al-thalatha or Trinitarian tawheed of Ibn Taymiyyah or other things. So that was just the spirit behind the comment. I had to clarify that. Go ahead.
And I wanted to clarify one thing, Imam. It came to my mind, and I thought I would clarify. When I was talking about Aqidah versus Millah, I was not in any way saying that Aqidah is a bad word. My issue is that the word Millah is from the Book of Allah, and we as Muslims, we tend not to use the words of Allah. We tend to use the words of the scholars, of men. And that this concept of millah is all throughout the Book of Allah. It's all throughout the Quran. And we don't refer to this term and other terms. It's not just this term. But I was talking about it in the sense of how we've allowed our religion to be narrow, to just focus on a particular area, whereas the idea of millah was very vast. And the prophet, the disbelievers in all of the prophets' times, they gave all of the prophets an ultimatum. وَقَالَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا لِرُسُلِهِمْ لَنُخْرِجَنَّكَ مِنْ أَرْضِنَا أَلَّا تَعُدُنَّ فِي مِلَّتِنَا. So they gave all of the messengers this ultimatum. We will run you out of our land, or we will forcibly turn you to our millah. And so I wanted to emphasize returning back to understanding millah. I'm not saying Aqidah, don't use it, it's a bad word. I'm just saying we should emphasize the words of the Quran. And that was my point.
Imam Amin, you've heard quite a bit that said. I like to hear your take, since you're the resident imam / head facilitator.
I'm willing to. Did y'all get to the book?
No, we haven't touched on the book yet. But let the brother.
I mean, I hope this ain't gonna be the last time we talk. I want to hear the material here. I mean,
yeah.
Listen, Honestly, I'm practicing something myself. Is someone says something to me, it's common, but sometimes I never heard it like this, and it really registered to me. He said, the brain and the tongue can't work at the same time. He said, if one is going to work, the other one must shut down. They don't work simultaneously. So if one is working, the other one is shut down until the one finished working, then the other one takes the message. So I'm trying to, because we don't have a lot of time, you know, I'm talking about in life. And we're at a crucial stage in our life. So we need to extract all the benefit while it's available. So we can't spend time in getting distracted from benefit for side points, right? Like we want the meat. The title, put that book up again, and I want to put it up. The Enemy Within. Up a little bit higher, Dawood, please. Barakallahu fiki, ma'am. Why we Black Americans must confront ourselves. That's a serious title. And the title should indicate the important context of the book. That if you have a good title, we need that title. I know it's getting tiresome, but could you put it up a little bit more? And it's two things. How many pages is that book?
The chapters 1 through 6. Well, the book in its entirety are 320 pages, but that's, you know, bibliography, notes, table of contents, index. So chapter 1, introduction through chapter 6 is about 276 pages, I think it is, something like that.
How long did it take you to write that book?
10 years.
10 years. How much research hours do you think you put in that book?
Oh man, oh boy, thousands. Yeah, that's a good question. I didn't. I only looked at it in terms of years. I didn't look at it in terms of research hours. I didn't look in terms of the books that I read, the journals, the journals, the books that I read, books that I checked out, hours that I spent at the library, hours that I spent at the Library of Congress when I moved here. Yeah. It took me 10 years.
So you're saying thousands of hours?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Okay, so that's time, that's research. How much of what you wrote, if you can say, was practical experience of the content of your book?
Yeah, so at the beginning of the chapters, I use an anecdotal story of my own life that is a lead in to some of the main themes of the chapter. So I'll give an example. One of the chapters, years ago, there was a brother, Muslim brother, his name, and I still remember his name. His brother named Yahya. I think his name was Yahya Abdul Noor. I hope he's still alive. But he worked on the grounds crew at Howard, and he fought in Vietnam. And he had a meeting with a North Vietnamese guerrilla fighter, right? A representative of the so-called Viet Cong. That's what white folks call them. And so this is supposedly an enemy, but the Viet Cong soldier asked him, he said, this is in Vietnam. The Vietnamese soldier asked him, he said, whatever happened to those men in Alabama who bombed that church and killed those 4 little girls? Now, this is a Vietnamese guerrilla fighter asking a Black American soldier in America this question. And he said he couldn't believe it. He was shocked. He said, to my knowledge, nothing ever happened. So the Vietnamese was puzzled. He started scratching his head. He's like, so wait a minute. You all are over here fighting me and my people. and trying to prevent our liberation. But you and your people would not fight against the enemies in your own country who bomb your churches and murder your little girls. You won't fight them, but you're here fighting us at the behest of a government who doesn't even respect you as human beings. So that's one example that I put in the book that's a lead in to the themes of that chapter. And that's something that happened to me when I was into my, I think I just started my 4th year at Howard.
So,
yeah.
And I'm asking these questions because a lot of times one of our big problems is we don't respect effort and education and consistency and diligence and thoroughness. And I'm asking these questions to highlight what went into that book, the thought, the practical aspect, and actually the spirit behind it that inspired you, that ba'ith, that urge that pushed you to write it. What was the ba'ith? What was that urge? What was that push that said, I have to put this to pen and paper? What was it?
My love of my people, my love of my shop, and my desire to really want to get to the bottom, my desire to really want to create discussions all across America, and to really get us to confront these demons once and for all. For us to the fundamental in response to your question, Imam, my love of Black people. I mean, to just summarize it, my love of my shop, the love of my people, and wanting to get to the bottom of why we do the things that we do to each other that we never do to anyone else. The things that we normalize with each other that we never dream of normalizing with anyone else. Why we support other people and we don't want to support each other. So I wanted to, my love of my people, wanting to see my people better, but in order for us to be better, we have to admit that we have some inner demons. And we have to ask some uncomfortable questions, and we have to confront this demon, this enemy within, because no one else is going to confront it but us. No one else is victimized by it but us.
And in your writing, because when you write, you have to review, you have to edit, and sometimes when you're writing, thoughts come out because they're materialized on paper that weren't in the mind, and now you see it from a different light. Through your journey of writing, how many times did you re-examine your thought process of what you were trying to put out?
Oh man, good question, Sheikh. What started out is not what ended up. I mean, I made various changes. I read things and I'm like, that doesn't sound right. Thoughts would come to my head while I was out, and I'm like, I gotta find a way to fuse this in. There would be a major issue that would happen, and I'm like, I gotta take this and fuse this into the book somehow, because I thought it was a very important incident that was connected to what I had written. I was going through, it was very cathartic. I mean, because I was going through my own challenges. I was taking care of my mom. I was dealing with some other personal challenges. It was therapeutic in a lot of ways. But, I guess that one of the things that I did a lot is going back and changing and trying to put as much in the book to highlight my salient points, right? To use practical examples that people could access. And that was the other thing, I wanted to do, and that was somewhat of a challenge, but alhamdulillah, Allah Azza wa Jalla made it easy. I wanted to write something that was academic, but yet in layman terms where most people or many people could access it.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to write over people's heads. I wanted it to be accessible to people where many of us or most of us, inshallah, could understand it and that could get it.
How did, because I'm trying to get the spirit of the book, so, and what is intended, and then how we can extract the most benefit from it, because oftentimes you have a book but not the author. So books are actual written documents of the life experience and thought process of the author himself.
Right.
But sometimes when you just have a book, it's not alive without the author. Right. And I noticed just from our Islamic tradition, which I tell people all the time, there's a difference from reading a book and living a book. And one of the ways that we learn is bitalaqi, right? We sit with our mashayikh and we benefit and we read books on them, and reading them books on them, we're actually living the book. And the book will hit differently. It will settle differently. So it's extremely important that a book is nice, but that living book is very important to understanding the written book.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry.
No. So,
yeah.
Question to you.
Yeah.
With that, so I'm just giving you why I'm asking these lines of questions, because they help me process what I'm going to read, inshallah, and we're all going to read, because I don't believe in not supporting my own. So you might have seen, and everyone have seen, I done put your book up from Amazon probably about 15 times. Right? Because one of the things, it's easy to talk, but very difficult to do. And as Muslims, we need both aspects, right? We got to have a conviction. We got to have a financial sacrifice. And then we got to have a practical, physical sacrifice. One of my most favorite verses in the Quran points to us when it describes the believer. As Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala mentioned in the Quran, إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا بِاللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ ثُمَّ لَمْ يَرْتَابُوا وَجَاهَدُوا بِأَمْوَالِهِمْ وَأَنفُسِهِمْ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الصَّادِقُونَ. And in that verse, all that is contained. Our belief, which is the conviction of something that we should have. Our practical sacrifice with our money and with ourselves. And that's the only way we're going to prove to be sincere. Other than that, it's just, speech. So we can't say, man, brother, that was nice. Oh, that was good. MashaAllah, brother, deep. But then when it comes to spending on spreading that deepness and that nice point, we lose our iman there, right? So,
it's interesting.
Those questions for that.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up, Imam, because I had to do that myself. So not only did I write the book, but I paid for it out of my pocket. So the cover, the editing, the digital marketing. So it's not only, Imam, it's not only thousands of hours, it's thousands of dollars.
That's right.
Right? It's not only 10 years of writing, not only thousands of hours of research, but it's thousands of dollars of book cover, website, editing, corrections, digital marketing. So, and that's out of my own pocket. Alhamdulillah.
Question.
Yeah.
So you graduated your undergrad from Howard University in what?
Yeah. In education. I mean, in economics.
Economics.
And then
And
master's
then your graduate studies was at the University of Michigan.
Right.
In what?
In education.
So you have a bachelor's in economics and a master's in education.
Right.
How did your academic career and your academic studies impact your understanding in terms of the content of what you were writing about in your book?
So there were two key factors in terms of my professional experiences that went into this book. So before I went to grad school, I spent 6 years working in criminal justice. 5 of them was as a probation officer, and then another year was working directly in the jail as a social worker in the Wayne County Jail. And then after that, I went to grad school and became a teacher in secondary education. And I saw the correlation when I worked in the criminal justice field. I saw different things. So I saw illiteracy, I saw aggression, I saw, again, the way in which we belittle and degrade each other. I saw some of these same things when I worked in public education. So what I began to see, what began to emerge were some common themes that I saw in the different professional capacities that I worked in, right? And that helped inform my reading. It helped inform my research. Different books that I read from different educators. My background in economics. One of the books that I read was an excellent book, which I have it here, by a man named Harold Cruz. So Harold Cruz wrote a famous book called The Crises of the Negro Intellectual. But another book that he read that I used for my research was a book called Plural But Equal. And it helped me understand and dissect this issue in the Black community of integration and assimilation versus pluralism. And it enabled me to present the argument in the 3rd chapter that I make the argument that Black Americans made a huge mistake pursuing integration, when in reality, what we should have pursued was pluralism. So, so my background of understanding certain fundamental economic principles, and then my background of working in criminal justice and being a public school educator, that lent a lot to into writing this.
Can you give a little more insight? Can you give a little more insight in terms of the distinction between integration and pluralism, why you prefer pluralism? So give maybe a distinction between the two so we can have more context to understand you.
Yeah, sure. So integration, right? So let me give a backdrop in terms of what I mean when I'm talking about in this chapter. The push toward racial integration that the modern civil rights movement was moving toward, right? They were pushing toward a greater inclusion for Black Americans into the broader spectrum and removing the legal restrictions of racial segregation, right? So I make the argument that desegregation was good in terms of Americans who are paying taxes should not be restricted in where they can go to school, where they can live. Integration is different because that means that you and I have to be subsumed by and assimilated into the dominant society, right? It's not only that you gain access to the broader society, But in the process, you adopt their beliefs, their philosophies, their ideologies, and their practices. Whereas pluralism means that you avail yourself of what the society has to offer, but you maintain your own belief system. You maintain your own worldview or your own millah. You maintain your own concept of what's right and what's wrong. You don't compromise that, right? So, for example, the Amish, the Mormons, the Mennonites, they chose to live a pluralistic existence, right? They chose to avail themselves of what America has to offer while maintaining their own identity of who they were, and they didn't relinquish that or abandon that. What we Black folks did, not only did we abandon our own businesses and our own institutions, we abandoned our own morals, our own ethics, and our own spirituality. And we integrated the liberalism, the atheism, the secularism, the hedonism, the nudity, the sexual depravity of other ethnic groups.
And don't forget the individualism.
The individualism, that's right. The individualism. Exactly. Exactly. And so, and the irony, and Imam Dawood and I talk about this all the time, and Salat al-Maghrib has been in here too. But the irony that our people don't understand that when you adopt someone else's practices, when you adopt their philosophies and ideas, you become them. So this is the real meaning of meant to shabiha bi qawmin fahuwa minhum. Right? This is who you become.
Translate that, CD.
Oh, right. So whoever imitates a people is to be counted as being from amongst those people. So if you wear, cut off Daisy Dukes or whatever, or you dress a certain way like the people from Western Europe, this is who you are. I don't care how dark you are. I don't care how long you've been a vegetarian. I don't care how many times in a day you say hotel. I don't care how many trips you've made to Africa. Your lifestyle and your philosophy dictates who you really are. This is who you really are. And so this is one of the ways where integration has helped to destroy Black America. It's not, we didn't just give away our businesses and allow other ethnic groups to come into our country and get rich, but we gave away our own morality and our own decency, our own collective identity, and our own self-respect.
You in Detroit as well right now?
I'm right outside of DC right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Imam Dawood, it ain't prayer time for you right this minute, is it?
Oh, when I jumped off the screen, I made Maghrib prayer.
Okay. If you can go pray Maghrib, what I'm going to ask Imam Dawood to do is to read the chapters, give us the chapter titles, so we can come back when you come back to discuss them. So Imam Dawood, if you can give us the structure of the book, maybe from the table of contents, or so we can have an idea of the matters that are talked about in the book, so we can ask some further questions.
Okay. Hold on. Just showing my age right here, Imam. I gotta get my reading glasses.
You make sure that ain't a result of diabetes.
No, it's not. No, I get regular checkups, and that's something we as African American Black men need to do. We have to get regular checkups, especially when we start hit the age of 40. Okay, so foreword, the Fakir. I wrote the foreword to the book. We have the introduction written by our beloved brother Ustad Shaka. Chapter 1 is how did Black Americans become a despised and oppressed group? With subpart 1, early English perceptions of Africans, subsection 2, economic, religious, and scientific justification for African subordination, and then subsection 3, the establishment of white supremacy in the South. That's chapter 1.
All right, chapter 1. I want to show you something why these are relative. I mean, really, they're very important, excuse me, and relevant to things. I'm gonna share something. Our community is mixed. Even though I'm the imam and the leadership at Masjid Muhammad is African American, but the majority of our community has become immigrants. If you talk about numbers who attend on a regular basis, it's predominantly immigrants, because where the masjid is at, they are heavily populated, and most of them have more free time than we do. Their lives are arranged a little differently. So we was having some late night discussions during Ramadan that went to 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning. And we would have all the different ethnicities in the masjid in my office, and we're talking. And so we said, we're going to have real talk, no holds barred, because we all brothers, and we ain't the problem we're talking about, but we want to identify the problem so we can work at solving it. So I asked one of the Pakistani brothers, who, mashallah, he's very diligent and very a hard worker in the masjid and always on the front lines. I said to him, tell me how, from your experience, I'm talking about you, among your people, how do they feel about Black people? And I said, don't sugarcoat it. Say it as you believe it and experience it to be. He said, we in general, not every single individual, he said, we in general believe or feel as though only 1% of Black people are good. That's what he said. He said, and the rest, stay away from them. And then I asked him.
One question, clarifying question. When this Pakistani brother said 1% of African Americans are good, is he talking about African Americans as a whole or African American Muslims?
African Americans. We weren't talking about Muslims or non-Muslims. We're talking about Black people.
Okay. All right.
We're having real talk. And then I asked him, why do you think, because it's his conviction, and he's Pakistani, they in it. He said, then he started to elaborate on the reasons why that feeling is spread amongst his people. He was talking about the high rate of divorce. He was talking about the fatherless homes. He was talking about the crime. He was talking about the lack of respect of each other, the individualistic approach to life. He was mentioning all these reasons why this perception is spread among many people, not every single Pakistani. That's not to be understood. He was talking about from his experience and the feeling, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then he said something real deep after that. So there was this Latino brother. So the Latino brother says, because it's the Bengali, there's Black, it's a mix, everybody in here. So the Latino brother says, well, how do y'all feel about us? He said, y'all 2%. And the 1% that y'all have over the Blacks is you got white skin.
La ilaha illallah.
No, we usually don't have these kind of conversations.
But he's keeping it real.
We ain't having it no other way, right? So we have a real talk so we can identify what we're dealing with and then have real dialogue to solve the issue. It may hurt what you hear, but if you don't know a person, because that was the thing, why there's this picture of African Americans, right? Is that the title? That's the basic theme of that chapter 1?
Oh, it is.
That
yeah.
theme is what?
Yeah. How did Black Americans become a despised and oppressed group?
Okay, so well, this is a person who's despised us. Now, let's be honest. When we deal and interact in our religious institutions with immigrants, do we not feel some of that thought pattern they have when they deal with us? Don't we feel as if they have some of that energy when they deal with us? Even if it ain't 1%, even if it's 50% or 30%, we feel the energy coming from that thought in our interaction. So therefore, it's important that we know it exists and how to confront it. And we should say, alhamdulillah, that we're that close that we can have a real talk. Now, we had other talks too, but just so, because some of us get real sensitive. So he asked me why I'm always so hard on the Pakistanis and the Bengalis. I said, because y'all are ignorant of the religion and act like y'all know it, and y'all don't even know the basics. We was having, so because they think I'm kind of hard on them, right? But sometimes they stroll as if they learned something, and they are worse than the Christians in our society in terms of knowledge. I'm talking about the average person, not every single person. So when we're having these real talks, so you want something from me and I want something from you, we're having a real dialogue. So I'm talking of that. That's why I asked about that one that one chapter, because people feel it. So he gave some reasons. Now, when we examine ourselves, how much of that is true, right? Like all right, you gave me these reasons why you think so ugly about me. And I wonder how much of that for us do we have to address and examine and take into consideration, right? And if we're be honest, how many of us recognize those things? Okay, 2.
Chapter 2. How did Black Americans learn to devalue and hate each other? Subpart 1, understanding internalized oppression. Subsection 2, colorism and color prejudice among Black Americans. Subsection 3, how Black Americans devalue each other through language. So that's chapter 2.
Go ahead.
Chapter 3, how integration underdeveloped Black America. Subsection 1, why integration? Subsection 2, the origins of Black American economic dependence. Subsection 3, why do other ethnic groups in the United States seem to thrive? Chapter 4, Black America's historical betrayal of its leaders, heroes, and heroines.
Oh, that's a heavy one.
Subsection 1, betrayal of slave insurrections and early Black American activists. Subsection 2, treachery and betrayal in the Black nationalist and radical tradition. Subsection 3, the Judas element within the Black American civil rights tradition.
Now, as a leader, as an imam in our communities, do you think many of our imams, our leaders, and I'm talking about Islam, and then outside, still to this day feel that in their efforts?
100%.
Could you elaborate?
Well, I mentioned it. So I gave the khutbah at Dar Rahma, where with our beloved brother Sheikh Abdul Kareem. He invited me to be the khatib this week. So, and part of what I talked about was the issue that is, just as the Prophet ﷺ, had agent provocateurs and informants who sought to undermine the community. Anything that happened in the generation of Sahaba happens later on with other generations and will happen with us. So I mentioned this, like we know that Sahabi Jalil Hudhayfa ibn al-Yaman was Sahab Basir. He's the one that the Prophet ﷺ gave the secret to of the names of the hypocrites in Medina. And of course, the only reason why he didn't execute them for their khiyana, for their treason, because he did not want to be said that after him that Muhammad killed his companions, right? So I mentioned this in the context of some things that have been going on in our community, but we've had several instances. The most dramatic was when Imam Luqman was killed by the FBI in 2009, in which he was set up by 3 FBI informants.
Mm-hmm.
But we have people who undermine. There's different shades. The worst is the agent provocateur, or the informant, or the hypocrite, who says they're with the community but really working against the community, actively on behalf of other people's interests or their permanent interests. But then you have useful idiots like Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anh. He said, "Aduwan aqal khayrun min sadiqin jahil aw sadiqin ahmaq," that the intelligent adversary is better than the foolish ally, right? And then this is where people are so ignorant or so up in their nafus, in their egos, that they can't follow nobody. Especially for us, when someone looks like them. So I'm telling you, I've served as imam in 2 different masajid, one with our people, and then one at the Bosnian American Islamic Center in Hamtramck, Michigan. As a matter of fact, I'm the only non-Balkan to ever serve as an imam over a Bosnian Jama'ah in the history of America, right? Guess who gave me way more problems? People who look like me or Bosnians? Just take a wild guess.
That doesn't need to be a wild guess. Right?
Okay.
Hey, wait a minute. That's sad.
It's real sad. You know why? Even because serving them, or even I've been asked to even serve as an assistant in a Jama'ah's majority Syrian, because when those people see that you have, because they're going to test your ilm, when they see that you understand usul and you have ilm and you carry yourself with confidence, they will respect your ilm. They'll treat you like the 1%, like that Pakistani brother mentioned, right? But you'll get like a lot of respect. Whereas our people, oh, who that ninja think he is? Oh, I remember when he first came into the deen. I remember when he was a lost found.
Man, I remember that brother didn't know what a sukoon was.
Yeah. Literally.
I remember in my Ansar days.
Literally. I had Ustad Shaka knows a story. I was talking about something years ago, and I had like a youth class, and a sister made a comment trying to say that, Imam Muhammad, Warfdi Muhammad, rahimahullah ta'ala, and Farrakhan were on the same level. I'm like, sister, no, they aren't. So they got different Aqidah. And we were like going back and forth a little bit in a respectful way. At least I was being respectful. This sister was older, and she said, check this out. This was like the trump card she threw. She said, well, you were born lost found. Said my family got their holy name from Master Farad Muhammad himself. So that was the end of the conversation right there. There's nothing else that I could say after that. So anyway,
I want to share that, but that is a habit. I want, that's not straight directly to Black folks though. Yeah. Even though it hurts because we in it, because we love our people and we wish we would get, but every people reject their own leaders in a way. That's a common thread. Imam al-Haddad, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu,
right on,
he said something that was so powerful. He said, I'm a door, but the people will not recognize that door till it becomes a grave, right? And that happens. And I remembered, I was saying, it's just some stuff that I remember from my childhood that sits with me that one time Dr. York, he was Imam Isa back in those days, right? He was talking about Sayyidina Isa ibn Maryam, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And he was saying he was rejected by his people because he was talking about himself while people were rejecting. He said it's the habit of that. He said that when Jesus was coming to people, they were like, hey, he ain't no Messiah, that's Mary's boy, right? I knew him, that spirit. That's how even they felt about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That idea of people not accepting their own. With us, we've been taught to rebel against our own. As I say sometime in the masjid, I am tired of the Khawarij among us, and I'm not talking about the Wahhabis. I'm talking about some of my own people who constantly look to undermine my efforts.
Wow. So
I'm not talking about Wahhabis. I'm talking about within.
Yeah.
And I put a post to give you. I was feeling it today, so I put a post, right? And that post, it said, dear brothers and sisters, please beware of the smiling knife. It's extremely dangerous.
Mm.
And when you look at that, I'll give you an example. I gave, at the Philadelphia Masjid, I did the first Jumu'ah for Ramadan. The first Jumu'ah in Ramadan, I was the khatib. I was supposed to be the khatib for the Eid. So the way that happened, I was supposed to give the khutbah for Eid. But I have my own community and I couldn't see myself, though I wanted to, I couldn't leave my community and go to Philadelphia. That wouldn't have sat right with my own people. So I had to, unfortunately, I had to decline it. But they were welcoming me and they would have laid out the red carpet. These are African Americans. Everything, and I know the leaders in there, the administrators, the imams, I know them very well for years, right? They would have laid the red carpet, but at my own home, sometimes I have a struggle with, so this is the nature of people, because I know him, even though I'm sheikh one place, in here I'm Amin, right? I'm Amin, but when I go somewhere, I'm sheikh, they carry my bags, they got my parking space. Right here, I have to scream every time I come to the masjid, hey man, I gotta give this speech, could you please leave me a parking spot? They'll go right in the spot, right in front of it and block it. So that's a nature of people with their own. And I just didn't want it to seem like it's just black folks, but I think we have an emphasis because we have this idea of, I'm not going to let him climb over me. What do you think about that, Shakir?
Yeah, but by the way, why you walked away, beloved? Why you walked away, beloved? I was reading through your table of contents. We got through the first 4 of the 6 chapters, and that's what sparked that when we were talking about the Black America's historical betrayal of its leaders, heroes, and heroines. That's the content.
Yeah, Imam Amin and Imam Dawood. I've heard that before. People say, well, everybody betrays each other, and that's true. But I think the difference, where I tried to make the difference here, is that the leaders in our community who were betrayed by us were specifically working for the liberation of Black people. There was no mistake about it. They were specifically dedicated to the liberation of their people. Mm-hmm. And I also hear people, because I've gotten comments. Well, other people shoot up their neighborhoods. Well, other people have been victims of slavery too. Other people have been fired from their jobs unjustly. Other people have been shot by the police. Other people have suffered racism. So there's an element amongst Black folks when it comes to oppression, we want to be special. But when it comes to our pathologies, we want to be common. So we want to have our cake and eat it too. When it comes to oppression, we're exclusive. Nobody's suffered like we have. But when it comes to calling us out on our garbage, oh, we're just like everybody else. Everybody got problems. So we want to have our cake and eat it too. And it doesn't work like that.
I want to ask a question aside from that point. Please don't. I got your point. But that saying, I've never who wants cake that they can't eat? I don't get it.
Right.
I mean, if I got cake, I want to eat it. If I can't eat it, I don't want no cake. Yeah. So why I can't have my cake and eat it too?
Right. Yeah.
That's just, that one always, really. Who came up with that and what does it really mean?
Yeah. So, I think when people ask me what is my favorite, I don't know if favorite chapter is the right word, but the chapter that really shocked me when I did the research was this chapter. And maybe in that sense, this chapter is the most, I don't want to say special, but
I'll tell you what, when I read it, it was the most painful.
Yeah. Okay. That's
what, painful.
Yeah, it's the most painful because I never knew that Emmett Till was betrayed. I mean, I never knew that Black men were involved in Emmett Till's kidnapping and murder. Yeah, and your response, that when I say that to people, because when I was at homecoming last year, there was a guy, and I knew him, but we weren't really close, and I never knew he was from Mississippi. But I mentioned this during homecoming weekend. I say, man, yeah, I was doing the research, and they were asking me about my book, and I was talking about this chapter, and I was like, well, yeah, Black people involved in the kidnapping, murder of Emmett Till. And he was like, wait a minute, what? He's like, I'm from Mississippi. I never heard that. I say, yeah, man, 3 Black men were involved in the kidnapping and murder of Emmett Till. And, so I went into it a little bit and explained it. But so many of these leaders from who do I start with? Not Denmark Vesey, but the guy before, Gabriel Prosser. So from the early slave revolts, Gabriel Prosser, Denmark Vesey, Nat Turner, Harriet Tubman, Ida B. Wells, they all were betrayed by Black folks. Marcus Garvey, obviously Malcolm X, right? The members of the Nation of Islam, they firebombed Malcolm's house, but they never threw a smoke bomb at the Ku Klux Klan. I hope I'm not offending anybody by saying this.
This is the Black Imams Roundtable,
right? Yeah,
special edition without the other Black Imams.
Yeah,
we can say what we want.
Yeah. So
Kumo D said, I never had to run by the Ku Klux Klan, so I shouldn't have to run from a Black man.
Right. So they were real gangsters against Malcolm. They never threw a firecracker at any Nazis. They never threw a smoke bomb at any white supremacists. But they murdered Malcolm. And again, the colorism, that old redhead nigga, and right again. So we back to the colorism, right? They firebombed Malcolm's home, assassinated Malcolm. They went up on 16th Street and slaughtered the family of Hamas, but never slaughtered any Nazis. Never hunted down any war criminals. Never killed any Klansmen. Never killed anybody from the White Citizens Council. So again. I'm saying Black folks, gangsters against Black folks, never been gangsters to anybody else.
So you talk about a mentality, because I'll give you another thing, and this is common as Black Imams, and Black Imams experience this. We'll wrestle with each other, with our leadership,
right?
But we'll go to the Pakistani or the Bengali or the Arab masjid, sit there quietly, don't utter a word, and leave out with no ruckus.
Yeah, because they're better than us.
Right? You heard what I said? You'll
Yeah.
come to the black-led masjid where there's a black imam,
Right.
and you got everything to input, everything to say, everything to criticize, right? And go to the Bengali, Pakistani-led, Arab-led masjid, and mum's the word, compliance is the obligation.
That's right. A brother's married to a Black American, African American sister, and he can't find a job, or if he finds a job, he can't keep a job. He marries a Moroccan sister, he gets 3 jobs. And he does DoorDash, Uber, and sells oils and incense. And he's going to fly our family over. Because the Moroccan sister is more valuable than our women. Remember, our women are hooks and bits, right? Same with the sisters. They're not going to listen to a Black American man, right? But when they go to work, they're not going to put their hand in the face of their Irish coworker. They're not going to tell him talk to the hand, right? They're not going to accept polygamy with a Black American man. They get divorced from him. They marry a Nigerian and they become his 3rd wife. So again, Negroisms, right? Negroisms, being Negroes. We have a built-in mechanism where everybody else is valuable except us.
Now, question. I don't know if you addressed it in your book, but if you can give us a summary, because wait a minute, wait 1 second. We're going to purchase his book, right? So we'll put that link up. Can I get some eyes who's going to purchase the book, and I'll put the first I. There you go. That's me. Even though it's under Masjid Muhammad, that's me. I'm going to purchase this book. How many eyes we going to get? Let's count them numbers. Do you get to see when they brought your book, right?
I don't, when I go on Amazon, I can't see who bought it.
No, I'm saying you get to see it was purchases. You get to see this purchase. You get your
there's a sales, and I get to see how many purchases were the last couple weeks.
Right. So look at those numbers. We got well over almost 140 something people. So we want some sales tonight.
But the bigger thing, brothers and sisters, Jazakallah khairan, thank you for your support. The bigger thing is, wallahi, I want, as what we're doing now, I want to do this all over the country. I want some of you all making the comments, the truth hurts. I want us to have these uncomfortable conversations with each other. Again, why is it working with Black people is nationalism, but working with Arabs is not nationalism? Again, when Isa bin Maryam said he's from the Bani Israel, no one calls him a nationalist. But Malcolm, oh no, he was still into that nationalism. Right. So
we go through it all. Why we call the Black Imams Roundtable, and we always answer directly, we Black. That's why.
Right. But we don't ask the Pakistanis why they own all the gas stations. We don't accuse them of asabiya when they get together. And first of all, they tell us stay away from the dunya, but they buying more and more gas stations. And we don't call that asabiya.
But here's the thing, right? In your book, did you address the problem and provide some practical solutions, or you were still addressing the problem and solutions is forthcoming?
So I did a little bit of both. So I talked about solutions, but part of my critique is that I don't think our problem is a lack of solutions. Our problem is the implementation of the solutions. I'll give you an example.
Say that again. That's powerful.
Our problem is not a lack of solutions. It's the implementation of the solutions.
One more time, because we got people that have put it up so we can share that so it can be copied.
Our problem is not a lack of solutions. It's the implementation of the solutions that have already been given to us.
Okay, can somebody put that up so we can share it one more last time?
Yes.
We do this here because that's powerful.
Yeah, our problem is not a lack of solutions. Our problem is the implementation of the solutions that have already been given to us.
Okay.
And
Very
I'll give you
well.
one problem. I'll give you an example.
1 second.
Yeah.
Can everybody copy that and repost it? Can you copy and paste this? Our problem is not lack of solutions. It is the implementation of the solutions that have already been given to us.
I'll give you one example, economics. So, and again, regardless of their Aqidah and their Millah, I'm not going to go into that. But let's talk about the leaders historically that told Black Americans to practice cooperative economics. Booker T. Washington, Dr. Carter G. Woodson, Elijah Muhammad, right? I don't want nobody to put me off the manhaj for saying that, but Elijah Muhammad, Malcolm X, Dr. Claude Anderson, George Frazier, et cetera, right? They talked about the need to practice cooperative economics. We see other groups in this country practice cooperative economics. The irony that during segregation, we practiced cooperative economics because we had to, but it was forced. It was not, it didn't emanate from within, it was forced. But I'm talking about practicing cooperative economics because this is what we really wanted to do. And here we are seeing people from other parts of the world come to our community, put their money together, and do business. And we still say, well, what's the solution? Well, our leaders have given us solutions over 100. We just haven't implemented the solution. We haven't implemented cooperative economics. But we've seen other people do it and be successful. So that's just one example of that not being and you know, the irony is funny. The irony that if I could, you know, mention Elijah Muhammad in this sense, this is the irony. I think it was in 1973.
Can I pause for you a minute? Because I notice you keep saying that, and I just want to share something with you.
Okay.
Right. We had an earlier discussion. I'm saying this for this reason. Stop letting the one who doesn't have your interests at heart dictate how you speak and engage. Follow what I mean? Many of us won't say Elijah Muhammad or Malcolm X or Drew Ali or whoever.
Right.
Because some Arab told us
Yes.
that that's against the Sunnah.
Yes.
And have used the Sunnah to make us slaves again.
Yes, yes. And those same Arabs allow Europeans to set up military bases in their countries to slaughter the Muslims. Right.
Even if they didn't do that.
Yeah.
We have to become intellectual enough, educated enough that we don't automatically become a slave due to education or the lack thereof.
And alhamdulillah, ma'am, you said that because I've been in forums where if I know I say that name, people will shut down. So alhamdulillah, that's the only reason.
I'm just saying, we need a forum where we can be black.
Absolutely, absolutely.
My father wasn't good in everything. But you know one thing my father gave me? He made me a man.
Yes.
He wasn't a Muslim. He had his deficiencies.
Right. Yeah.
But he was a man, even in his deficiencies.
Right. So was mine.
And I remember, I'll never forget, just to give you, I'm saying my point. I've never seen a man that had dignity and pride in his manhood like my father.
Allahu Akbar.
My father hated a punk.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
My father was like, we be in the project, you come home crying because somebody beat you up on the playground, you're not getting in that house.
Right.
You better take your coward butt out there and get beat up.
That's right.
That was my dad.
Yeah. Yeah.
And a lot of the energy some people see from me, it came from my father.
Right.
My father had this attitude. He had two like strong sayings. 3. Let me give all 3 of them to you. So I give honor to my father here, right? Number 1, he said, "My name is Qualified Bob. I get the job done."
Mm.
That's a man.
Mm.
My name is Qualified Bob. I get the job done. Number 2, I cut you in half. Right?
Right. Yeah.
Number 3, I graduated from SWU. Like, Dad, what the heck is SWU? Sidewalk University. You see that spirit?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the spirit my father left in me and my brother.
Alhamdulillah.
And no matter where we at, we have that spirit that came from that black man.
Alhamdulillah. Yeah.
You follow my point?
Yeah,
When
absolutely.
you look at Elijah Muhammad, he wasn't the best man.
Right.
He gave us some things as black men that we need that we don't have today. Don't let nobody take that.
And I put that in the book. So just so you know, I put that in the book.
So I'm just saying that
yeah.
in the context,
Yeah.
we have to vehemently oppose someone trying to make us punks. Seriously. About ours.
Yeah, about ours. Yeah.
Absolutely not.
Yeah. So I put what
and if we're going to criticize, we're going to do that. You don't got that right.
Yes. And so what you just said in a nutshell, I put that particular aspect of Elijah Muhammad in the book. But I wanted to, so one of the things Elijah Muhammad said in 1973 Savior's Day address, and one of my good friends was there as a young FOI. Elijah Muhammad got frustrated, not just with his community, but with black people. And something to the effect, I've been telling you Negroes for 30, 40 years to clean up and do something for yourself. I'm going to stop blaming the white man, but I'm going to start more and more criticizing you all for blowing wasted opportunities. And so, you know, again, going back to my original point is that that's not part of my critique in the book. I do offer some solutions, but part of wanting to have these discussions is, again, it's not a lack of solution, it's the follow through. That tends to be our biggest issue, is the follow through and the commitment, whether it's economics, whether it's health, whether it's learning, a lot of things. It's the follow through. It's not the lack of, it's the follow through.
And so if you want to say, let's try to solve that issue. In terms of follow through, what are the tools we need to motivate our people, at least at the level of critical mass, right? At least at that level, because you're not gonna get everybody. But what do we need to motivate us at the level of critical mass to get that done? If you can give me 3 ways to achieve that, what would they be?
So number one, practice cooperative economics with our families. Husband and wife investing in a mutual fund, teaching children how to invest. A masjid, the money we collect, investing it as a masjid, and we all become shareholders. Teaching financial literacy to the masajid, teaching them how to invest, teaching, you know, doing some practical things to build trust and to create a culture of collectivized economics.
That point right there, repeat that again. That last point, very important.
Starting out small to create trust, and developing a program such that we develop a cultural fixture of cooperative economics, right? The Jews don't need a march in order to put their money together. This has become part of their culture. Other ethnic groups, it's become part of their culture. So these things have to be part of our culture. The second thing is that they have to become infused in our religious discourse.
Allah.
They have to be part of the discourse. This has to be infused in khutbatul Jumu'ah. This has to be part of the discourse, along with so many other things. And then number three, we have to have consistent forums like this on a regular basis. I mean, this has to, brothers and sisters, I mean, this has to be, again, things like this are too few far in between. And, one of the reasons why so many of the young Muslims, they come to the masjid, there's no program.
Mm-hmm.
There's often just a bunch of old men sitting around talking about the Sahaba, but they don't see anything in motion. That was the appeal of the Nation of Islam. They had a program. They had a mission statement to go out and, rescue the so-called Negro in the wilderness of North America. Okay, that's a mission statement. What's the mission statement of the Muslim? To practice Quran and Sunnah. Okay, what does that mean? What does that mean on a practical level? So it's like, what's our mission statement?
I think, why that doesn't, it has a meaning. Really, it has a deep meaning. But you know what it is? The one who's trying to oppress you didn't teach you the meaning. Mm. So when we talk about Quran and Sunnah, which is such a fallacy in practice, because Islam is not just Quran and Sunnah. Right. And literally.
Right.
And if I'll say it straight, if you just use Quran and Sunnah alone with nothing else, you will go astray. I said it.
Yeah.
If you use Quran and a Sunnah alone with nothing else, you will go astray. Why? Because there is a difference between narration and understanding. Do you understand what I said? There is a difference between narration and understanding. We'll narrate the Quran and the Sunnah without understanding and go astray. I'll give you an example. Some person narrates the Quran and here right hand possesses and he got women on the strobe. No, I'm serious.
Oh, no.
Imam, it happened right here in Detroit where brothers went to a spot called Deja Vu, a gentleman's club, and we're talking about they were giving tabligh to the dancers, and we found out because some sisters came to the Muslim Center talking about, oh yeah, brothers such and such, and they made us right-hand possessions. That happened right in Detroit.
I'm saying,
that's not even theoretical.
I watch all the time of people quoting the Quran and Sunnah in opposite of how it's applied.
Yeah.
What are you talking about? Where did you? I'll give you an example. Go ahead. I'll come. Go ahead. Hold on 1 second. 1 second. Give me 1 second. I'm sorry, I have to come back to that point because I have to go pray. They're waiting for me. Listen, here's my point though. And I'll come back. I know we're getting long. If we can we make it to like 9:30?
Inshallah.
9:45. I want to come back to this point so y'all can continue, inshallah. I don't want nobody to misunderstand me. There's a difference as we call narrating the text and understanding the text. It's two different things. And most of the problems in our community is narration without understanding. So that's why it don't work. Because you're saying Quran and Sunnah, and you don't know what goes with Quran and Sunnah. So you read a verse, you don't know the other stuff that's necessary. So sometimes you read a verse that is general and you make it specific. Sometimes it's specific and you make it general. Sometimes it's restricted and you make it unrestricted. And if you don't know all these tools, you're going to go astray, even though you quoting Quran. Do you understand my point?
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to a more technical understanding. And what we have, what has hurt us bad with this Quran and Sunnah idea, because people no longer even want to learn. They just quote Quran and Sunnah and run amok.
Yeah.
Let alone not even knowing the Sunnah. So they're reading Bukhari and Muslim. And even if it's in Arabic, I ain't talking about in English, even in Arabic, and don't know the other books of hadith, and don't know how those other books relate with different narrations that have an impact on that narration. You don't know nothing about all that, but you quoting the Sunnah and going crazy. It's very important.
Yeah.
So do y'all understand the context I'm talking?
Yeah. It's funny, Imam. I know you got to go. I just wanted to make this point. I lived overseas. I taught overseas. And this is one thing that people don't understand. Even though brothers go other places to study, they're not learning critical analysis. Right. They're learning memorization.
Exactly.
They're not learning critical analysis. They're not learning comprehension. They're not learning tafakkur and tadabbur. They're not learning how to ponder, to analyze. They're not learning that because they don't teach that. That's not a part of their educational philosophy over there.
No, it is. It's just not for you. It exists. They just ain't giving it to us. So we'll graduate from 4 years of school and still stupid.
Yeah.
And I hate to use that harsh word. I graduated from the university. Yeah, you got a 3rd grade education from the university. What are you talking about?
Right.
But for us, you're a graduate. The guy can't still stumbling over Arabic. What are you talking about? Right. And he's interpreting the Quran. The very verses he's interpreting, he's messing up. La hawla wa la quwwata. He don't know that because they stamped him. Here, boy, you're a graduate.
Yeah.
I'm saying that not to criticize education that they gave you, but that's not real education. No. But when you come operating on our people with that limited education, that limited understanding, you help us go crazy. So those young boys that we always blaming, they got that craziness from our crazy understanding of the Quran and Sunnah. Don't forget that part. I'll be back. I'm sorry. I got to go pray. Go ahead.
Yeah.
While we have this time, there's 2 other chapters I didn't read over to the sub titles or the table of contents to the audience. So I want to read that, and then you can chime in on wherever you think you points on these last 2 chapters.
Sure.
That you may think fits into the discussion while Imam Amin's leading Salat Isha. So chapter 5 of your book, The Psychology of Religious Expression in the Black American Community, Part 1. Did Jesus say that we must always forgive racist white people? Part 2. Did Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam say that we should abandon the struggle of Black Americans? Chapter 6. The Black American Family Dynamic, Cohesion, Community, or Chaos? Part 1. The Increasing Breakup of the Black American Family. Part 2. Black American Men and the Lack of Security for Black American Women and Children. Part 3. Black American Women and the Lack of Respect for Black American Men. Part 4. Becoming a quote-unquote real Part 4, becoming quote unquote real niggas. Any comments?
Yeah. So regarding in chapter 5, this phenomenon amongst Black Americans, and Black Americans who of various religious tracks, because it's not just Christians, even though I focus on Christians, but Muslims do it too. This idea or this doctrine of unlimited forgiveness, but the forgiveness almost always applies to Americans of European descent, and the forgiveness rarely applies to Americans of African descent. And so I talk about this this instance where the man who Dylan Roof, this racist white supremacist who went inside the church in South Carolina that was originally established by Denmark Vesey, ironically. And there was a biblical class being conducted by a South Carolina state senator, and this white supremacist went in there and began to disagree with certain scriptures, and then he went in his backpack and retrieved a 45 caliber pistol and began to open fire on the people in the church, and with hollow point bullets. And before it was over, he had murdered 8 Black people, and I think he wounded, I don't know how many. And then he was arrested the next day, 200 something miles away in Shelby, North Carolina. But at his bond hearing, one of the daughters of the victims yelled out to him, "I forgive you." Now, this is before this man said, "I was sorry." He obviously didn't have any contrition or any type of guilt for what he did. He wasn't apologetic for what he did. He had a jacket that had the flag of apartheid South Africa and Rhodesia on his jacket. For those of you who are listening who don't know, the country Zimbabwe used to be called Rhodesia, and it was named after Cecil Rhodes, who was a English industrialist and imperialist, who were one of the imperialists and conquerors who colonized Zimbabwe.
Which also the Rhodes Scholarship,
yes,
called Rhodes Scholars, named after the same devil.
Yes, it's named after the same devil, Cecil Rhodes. And the leader of the country was a man by the name of Ian Smith. And so Rhodesia was governed the same way that South Africa was. Very racist, very brutal, very barbaric. And so Dylan Roof had the flag of Rhodesia and the flag of South Africa on his jacket when he initiated the massacre inside of this Black American church. And so I talk about all of these examples historically where Black people go out of their way to forgive people who don't even acknowledge our humanity. We go out of our way to absolve and forgive people taking biblical scripture out of context, which, obviously the Bible has been changed, it's been tampered with. But the fact that they use biblical scripture to justify absolving racist white people of their barbarism, and yet they have absolutely no compassion and forgiveness for Black people. I've had cousins who talked about forgiving racist white people, and well, you know, when someone does something to you, you have to forgive them, because if you don't forgive them, they have control over you and you can't stay stuck in the same place. But they have another cousin they haven't spoken to in 10 years over a $50 debt. But of course, that cousin is black. So on the one hand, they're forgiving racist white supremacists who don't even acknowledge the humanity of black people. But then on another hand, they have absolutely no compassion or forgiveness for black people. And I mean, it's the same with black criminals. You know, as I said, you know, we as black Americans, we talk about being gangsters. We've never been gangsters toward anyone but black folks. And part of it is that psychology. So I talk about that. And then in the second part of chapter 5, I basically use Malcolm as the template of Black American Islam. Malcolm facilitated African Americans to go to Medina and to go to Al Azhar to study. That's how Sheikh Tawfiq, the founder of MIB in Harlem, that's how he got to Al Azhar. It was Malcolm who facilitated his scholarship to go to Al Azhar. And I had a Ebony magazine, and I don't know what I did with it. You know, when you move so many times, you lose things. But there's an Ebony magazine from 1969. And Betty Shabazz is on the front of it. And there's a section in the article where it's talking about Betty Shabazz, where Sheikh Tawfiq is sitting at the table teaching Malcolm's daughters Arabic. But Sheikh Tawfiq went to Al Azhar because Malcolm facilitated the scholarship for him to go. So I begin the chapter talking about after Malcolm leaves the Nation of Islam and Malcolm's idea of becoming a Sunni Muslim, becoming a Muslim, but at the same time continuing the liberation of Black Americans, of African Americans. And how the irony that people in the Black community looked at Malcolm as the model and example of what a Muslim should be. He's disciplined, he loves knowledge, he loves justice, and he loves his people, as the prophets of Allah loved their people. And so the irony that Black American Sunni Muslims distanced themselves from Malcolm for that very reason. They said he was promoting nationalism. He didn't know the deen. He was promoting Asabiyya, right? And so I use that to say that Black Americans left the Black American Muslims left the Black American community. Essentially, we abandoned our people.
Say that again.
Black
that means like a 3 Sunnah repeat.
Yeah, Black American Muslims abandoned the Black American community, right? Now, none of the prophets of Allah abandoned their people, but Black American Muslims abandoned their people. None of the prophets of Allah turned their back on their people until it was obvious they became kuffar and Allah said they're going to be destroyed. But we essentially turned our back on, and when I say turned our back on our people, we abandoned our people. We pronounced takfir. We called our people kafirs and we never gave them da'wah. So in the Quran, Allah says the prophets, they don't just bring ayat, they bring ayatim bayyinah. They bring verses in the language of the people. You can't call a person a kafir unless you've given them clear evidence in a language in which they understand it, right? We went to our people and gave our people a wrinkled up pamphlet on Islam with some ketchup stains on it. And we had some run over shoes and a dingy thobe. And we thought that we gave dawah. We didn't give dawah to our people. And we didn't give dawah to our people because we didn't love our people. Prophets of Allah loved their people, which is why they didn't want them to get destroyed. But us, nah, brother, my mother is a kafir. It's like, what? It's like, what? Nah, my mother's a kafir. Did you give her dawah? Nah, she a kafir. And you say, well, brother, what is a kafir? Kafir is a disbeliever. No, brother, kafir is someone who rejects the truth when they know the contents. That's a kafir. They know the truth and they consciously reject it. That's a kafir.
And just to show you that he's not exaggerating, we both know of an imam in Detroit who studied in the land of Tawheed, who said he gave his mother dawah on her deathbed, and she died. And he said in the Khutbatul Jummah, he said, my mom did not accept Islam. She died a kafira, and I hope that she burns in Nar Jahannam for eternity.
Now,
so when Ustaz Shaka says this, we know of a ninja who studied in Saudi, who literally said this on the minbar.
Now look at all the dua that Ibrahim made for his father. Now his father's a criminal. His father's a tyrant. Look at all of the dua that he made for his father. Until Allah had to stop him from doing it. But we're not making dua for our parents and our people at all. I mean, so that's that's the second part of chapter 5. Chapter 6, and I know we got to get going because Imam said try to wrap it up by 9:30 or 9:45, 9:34.
I mean, no, we could take our time. I just didn't want to extend over your time.
Yeah.
Necessary. Listen, and this should not be our only discussion.
Definitely
because we really, once people get the book and read it, we should be section to section because we need this discussion.
Yeah.
And I told you it needs, and I'm already putting it up, we need to do a workshop.
Yeah.
And I mean like a marathon, at least 6-hour workshop, breaking it up in part, really sitting down, making sure maybe we need to just bring the books together, talk about the sections, read, span, do some charts. We need to get this understanding to our people. So, you got to partner me. Let's get it.
Yeah. So the last chapter I talk about is I reference this controversial report that was done in 1965 by this Irish American senator by the name of Daniel Patrick Moynihan. And it was entitled The Moynihan Report, The Negro Family, a Case for National Action. And so Daniel Moynihan, he did his analysis and he said there's a growing problem amongst Black Americans, and that is the rise of female-headed households. Now, Daniel Patrick Moynihan's father, who worked in the advertising industry, they moved to New York. I think it was from Oklahoma. His father left them. So many people thought, Daniel Patrick Moynihan, he just some white man blaming Black folks and blah, yada, yada, yada. They dismissed his analysis. They didn't realize his analysis was largely personalized because his father had left him. And so he saw this growing phenomenon in the Black American community of the rise of female-headed households. And so he wrote this analysis, and he talked about the difference between Black American families that had two parents and the pathologies that develop from families that were headed by a single female, right? Children who are the problems they have in school, the self-esteem issues they have, they act out, all of these things that, you know, he went into. And he proposed this to Lyndon B. Johnson, and as an urgent issue that needed to become part of a national report, like a national program to rectify this. The report was put on the back burner. It was criticized and people dismissed it. And people came to legitimize single family homes in the Black community, right? Lyndon B. Johnson passed legislation that said that if women wanted to get welfare, they couldn't have a man in the home. So there was a rule called a man in the house rule, where a social worker could randomly show up at any time of the day to see if there was a man in the house, or if you all had any appliances or anything that had been purchased by someone else because you weren't supposed to afford anything else that went beyond your stipend from the government. And if they found anything in your house, and if they found a man there, they would pull your welfare, and you would lose your welfare. So this deliberately caused a growing chasm, particularly amongst low-income Black Americans, of female-headed households. Then feminism comes along, and I'm summarizing for the sake of time. Feminism comes along, and girl, you don't need no man. You don't need no man to you can do it alone. And academics and others legitimized female-headed households. So this is the origin of the strong Black woman phenomenon. You can do it yourself. You don't need a man. That Negro ain't no good anyway, right? This narrative of the strong Black woman who raises children by herself. This is the origin of this. It's also the origin of, it's also the beginnings. We talk about the mid-late 60s. It's the sexual revolution. So the sexual revolution is happening in American society, where you have white Americans who are influenced by the ideas of Sigmund Freud and some of these psychoanalysts, who believe that the libido, the sexual urge, needed to be released, and it shouldn't be restricted by ethics, morality, or religion. It should be allowed to run unchecked. And so the sexual revolution of the 1960s, make love, not war, we're just shacking up, we're not getting married, this legitimization of free sex, free and open sex, was promoted to the broader American society. And then we Black Americans embraced this too, whereas Black Americans were very conservative because of the Black church. But a lot of these white American liberals who promoted this were actually connected with the counterculture movement as well. And their ideas influenced groups like the Black Panther Party. That's why one of the things that the Nation of Islam had that the Panthers didn't, and even though ministers in the Nation of Islam, slept with different people, but the Black Panthers, they didn't have a moral element within their movement. That was not a part of the Panther movement. They didn't have a moral element that they tried to adhere to like the Nation. And so some of the old Panthers that I knew, They said, man, when Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seale, some of these dudes came to cities to do a rally, the first thing is like, hey, man, where the women at? Where the women at? So, you know, they talking about revolution, but they still trying to get their freak on at the same time. And the feds exploited this, right? So this current of immorality, decadence, and filth was directed at Black America. Feminism, zina, open, you know, orgies, and now in this day and time, it's homosexuality and transgenderism. The tragedy is that Black folks do not see this as an example of white supremacy. Right? This is white supremacy because it's back to what we said earlier, the hadith, meant to shabiha bi qawmin fahuwa minhum. Black folks have adopted the immorality of Western Europe, the tattoos, the booty shorts, the thongs, right? The orgies, and they don't see this as white supremacy, but that's what it is. We adopted their immorality and normalized it in our community. And then lastly, I talk about this phenomenon in our community, and this speaks to the brothers, you know, the people who shot up the funeral. This phenomenon of being real niggas. I'm a real nigga. I'm a real one. You know, I keep it gangster. I keep it 100. So real niggas drop out of school because being smart doesn't make you a real nigga. Being dumb makes you a real nigga. Keeping it gangster and carrying a pistol makes you a real nigga. Going to school and disrupting school makes you, right? The girls like you if you a slick Negro, right? If you a guy who studies, oh girl, I don't want to deal with him. He too square, right? So they like the brother who's been shot, stabbed, fell out of a second-story window, been in juvenile a couple times. This is the Negro that the girls want. So this crazy phenomenon of being a real nigga and listening to the garbage, the rap music that legitimizes this. But, you know, as I said, you know, real niggas have never been violent toward anyone except Black folks, right? They've never been real niggas toward anyone except Black people. Never confrontational to anyone else except members of the Black community. Never. Have never pulled guns on anyone else. It's funny, Dowd and I are from Detroit. As violent as Detroit was, there was a white guy in Detroit. His name was and he was a prosecutor. I'm gonna say this and I'm gonna let you all chime in. There was a prosecutor in the suburbs of Detroit named L. Brooks Patterson. So Detroit is Wayne County. L. Brooks Patterson was the prosecutor of Oakland County. And L. Brooks Patterson's name was enough to shake the most violent gangster Negroes, to shake them in their boots. Hey man, don't go to Oakland County and do anything. L. Brooks Patterson, L. Brooks Patterson, L. Brooks Patterson, L. Brooks Patterson. Right? So all of the violence that happened in Detroit, them same Negroes would not step foot across 8 Mile. Y'all saw the movie 8 Mile. They would not step cross 8 Mile and do anything remotely close to the violence that they visited within a predominantly Black American Detroit.
I got a deep question. I can't, because you touched on so many crucial things that lead to our circumstances that we find ourselves in today. And one of them you touched when you talk about these single family households ran by women, which young boys are being raised in. And I want you to try to touch on the emotional impact on young Black boys by being raised in a single house by women who are carrying the load by themselves. From your point of view, what kind of impact does that have on a young African American male growing up with the challenge without a man in his life?
Oh man, whoo boy. I mean, I'm like you, Sheikh. I was fortunate to have my father. I mean, not having someone to tell you not to go down to certain roads. I mean, not having a man to inspire you and give you confidence, not having a man to serve as your protector, that when all else fails, you know you can rely on your father, that your father is not going to abandon you. And when your father is not there, it's the ultimate abandonment. And you're raised in situations where it's not just that your mother is raising you, but your mother is raising you with a lot of hatred for your father and a lot of hatred for you because you remind her of your father. So it's all of those dynamics. And you know, it's like, you know, why doesn't my father want me? Why, I mean, where's my father? It's just I mean, there's so many dynamics there. There's so many issues because I know what my father meant to me. My father was my protector. My father was our protector. And you know, I remember my brother's bike got stolen. My father was riding around the neighborhood with a pistol. When I came home, I mean, because my father always kept guns. And, you know, he was, man, if one of them ninjas coming here, I'm gonna blah, blah, blah. You know, my father was a Korean vet. And my father also, he had a lot of anger towards white America too, because he always told his son, don't trust white folks. But I can't imagine my life without him. But I know many of the guys in my community who didn't have their fathers and how they went astray because they didn't have anybody to tell them to stay away from, don't get in that back seat or don't do this. And it's the same with the girls, right? Their fathers are the ones who are the first ones to tell them that they're beautiful. Their fathers are the first ones to validate them and protect them and be that security for them. And when their father is not there, they look for it in other places. You know, unfortunately. And, you know, women in our community who have been violated and molested by them, by their mother's boyfriend or the stepfather, because the father wasn't there to protect them. The father wasn't there to say, baby, I know you like him. I know you like how he sounds, but I'm sizing him up as a man and he's not good for you. So, you know, Daniel Patrick Moynihan, he said something in one of his quotes. He said that the majority of American society operates, even though this has affected other communities since then, the majority of American society operates, the majority of the world, but in this case, American society operates with a father and mother. When there is a subculture that is operating on a different principle, this places them at a decided disadvantage. When a subculture is operating on a different principle, This places them at a decided disadvantage. They're already a minority. They're already discriminated against. And so now 70% of their families are headed by a woman. So now what does that do with their ability to compete in the broader society?
So if I could add on something real quick to this, and the role of the father is extremely important. But let's say that one's biological father is not around. It's also the breakdown of community.
Yes.
Right, in which there are surrogate fathers or other men that step in as role models to help raise young males to be real men. There's also a problem in the Black community. And as Ustad Shaker said, some of this is deliberate, some of this is government engineered, but also we can't put all of the blame on the government. Some of it is also our fault in committing certain unforced errors. So when there's not male role models around, there's a breakdown of community. When one's male relatives don't even live close by who are doing positive things, then it's in the fitra of the human being. It's in the fitra of young males to look up to someone as a role model, right? So who's that role model become as a man? That's someone that's affiliate with the crew, then a set, then a gang, and they're involved in types of social depravity and criminal activity and behavior. So the head of the gang, 7 Mile Pyru, because we got, on the east side of Detroit, we got Bloods, right? Gangster Disciples on O Block. And by the way, the gang leader might have Shahada.
He does.
Actually, he does have Shahada, right?
Both of them.
And yeah, both of them. And so we got Muslims that are involved in gangs and crews in which young men who don't have their fathers around end up looking up to the gang member who's a Muslim, right? So this is also part of the reality. It's not just them, and we have to remember, our beloved Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was an orphan. His father was never in his life. Now, obviously, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protected him, gave him isma, and raised him up. But the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, father passed before he died. Okay, his grandfather stepped in and played the father role. Okay, then his grandfather died at a very young age. But then who stepped in? He went and moved in the house of who? Of Abu Talib. And Abu Talib he was known for being generous in Jahiliyyah. He was known as a noble from Quraysh, Bani Hashim, and a generous man, right? So, even if one's biological father is not around, there still has to be some sort of father figure that steps in. Otherwise, if it's not someone positive, it's going to be the head of the gang leader or the dope man, and then that dope man, might have Shahada, might call himself a Sunni. So that's the reality.
Can I share a story with you? Because you said this and you're speaking about Detroit, Chicago. And I remember, to show you different environments. So when I was in the feds, on the East Coast, you don't really have gangs. You have states, like in the state, it's what city you from. I'm from Atlantic City, I'm from Camden, I'm from Newark, right? That's in the state level. When you go to the federal level, it's, the last 3 numbers of your federal number. So I'm from Jersey, so Jersey's 050. And, they have different, codes for what state you're from. So on the East Coast, when I was on this side, everybody, Philly, New York, DC, the East Coast. when I got shipped out to Colorado, that's on the west. So I was in Florence, Colorado, which is the last stop in the feds. You don't go nowhere else. Once you get there, that's the end of the game. That's it. And when I finally got in general population, I remember walking on the compound and looking at the culture, because this was my first experience hands-on with gang culture. I had never seen that in my life. We got quote-unquote gangs, but they're not really gangs. They're from the neighborhood. Like, we all from the same neighborhood. This is gangs, initiations. And so it was just like, one day I could tell a story about this stuff. It was like crazy, right? I get out, I'm from the East Coast, and it ain't that many people out there from the East Coast. You only get out there because they can't control you no more, and then they isolate you for whatever reason. They administrative transfers, or they'll say that person is disrupting the orderly running of the institution, so we got to isolate them. Mine was for fighting against the Wahhabis, so they isolated me, right? But when I got out there, the first time seeing like real gang culture live, and and I'm like, now you're in a place where everybody got Buck Roger numbers, 30, 40, 50, 60, life. You know what I mean? Like, that's the people you're around. So you see this on the compound. You got OGs, Stones, Gangster Disciples,
Vice Lords,
Texas Mafia, Mexican Mafia, Crips, Bloods, 90 different types of Crips and Bloods. I mean, you're in a cesspool of all this stuff, right? So this is on the compound. So I go the first Jumu'ah, I go to the chapel, to Jumu'ah. And in Jumu'ah, they're broken into gangs at Jumu'ah. I'm like, this is crazy. Now, I'm from the East Coast. I never saw no stuff like this. They got hats with marks on them in their pockets at Jumu'ah, representing the different gangs. And I'm sitting looking at this stuff. I'm like, this stuff is so deep. These dudes ain't getting out of jail, most of them. And they still acting like that. And all their violence perpetrated against each other, never messing with the man who gave you life, right? Or 40 years. And I remember eventually I became the imam. When I got there, I became the imam of the community. So now I'm trying to get this gang stuff up out the community, like no more gangs. You can't be in no gang and be in the community. You got to get rid of that, right? And I don't know if people know about Islam in prison. It ain't like Islam in the street. Like, Islam in our communities is quite soft to Islam in the prison. And I'm talking about penitentiary. It's much different. Like, it's security, and even the Muslims, they're not a gang, but they make it a gang, if you understand what I mean. The administration looks at you as a gang, right? You ain't a gang, we Muslims. But they make it like that. And I remember one young brother, right? He had 45 years. He was a Crip. 45 years. Boy was 18 years old. 45 years. And he would be in the day room listening to Yo MTV raps, popping his fingers. And I used to go to this young brother. I'm like, yo, man, you got 45 years. 45 federal years. That means you not probably going to go home till you almost 60, bro. Right? And I said to him, how did you get like that? He said, I only had my set. That's it, all my life. No dad, no brothers. I had my set. And he said, that is my family. And some of them, and when we made the community stronger and they was getting out of those gangs, I heard some of them brothers be like, listen, man, I know what you're saying, Imam, but I can't do that because that's all I got home. If I go off this set, my family's in danger and I ain't got no men home. When you're talking about this dynamic, even in the institutions, you're seeing people living like that. And one of the things I realized is that if we're going to change that gang mentality, because people ask about the gangs, the community has to be a strong family as those gangs feel to those people.
Yes.
You follow what I mean? The Muslim community has to have an element of protection that those youth feel in those gangs. If they go to the community, and I'll stop, they go to the community and they feel that the community is weak, there's no way they're going to leave those gangs, especially if the gangs is Muslim and strong in their mind. You follow my point? So instead of criticizing, we need to tighten our ship. Where men are men, because you might say they crazy, but they actually have a sense of family to them, even it's warped. And they don't see that in the masjid, they're not going to join. Forget about it. And I'm said all that is that's what I learned in the prison, that we had to become so tight to break those chains of those gangs, because a lot of those brothers that were in that situation grew up without men. You follow what I mean?
If I may chime in, man, I'm sorry. You struck a nerve. You know, the Chicago phenomenon is probably the most remarkable and interesting for a number of reasons. And I'll tell you why. The gangs in Chicago started initially as a protection for the Black community from white gangs. So the Vice Lords, the Black Peace Stone Rangers, they were the Black Stone Raiders at first, because they were named after the street. And they said we need to band together and, you know, protect ourselves from these, from these white, eventually they morphed into something else. But the gangs in Chicago, the late Imam Abdul Ali Musa of Masjid al-Islam in Washington, D.C., he was locked up in Leavenworth with Jeff Fort, who's now Abdul Malik Khalifa. And his daughter is Amina Matthews, who works for the Interrupters. Those gangs in Chicago, they always had, not always, but they had elements of Islam. So at one point in time, you couldn't be a vice lord unless you memorize Al-Fatiha. You had to memorize Al-Fatiha to be a vice lord. When the Blackstone Rangers became El Rukin, right? Which is Ar-Rukin, like Arukana Salat, right? He changed it to the El Rukins. So their rulers in the El Rukins became Sharifs, Mahdis, Khalifas, Ikamas, right? One of their criticisms of the Sunni Muslims was that we were not organized and structured. That was one of their criticisms. Because a good friend of mine is from Chicago. He used to be a GD and then a BD. Alhamdulillah, he's Muslim. But those gang members who had some element of Islamic influence, but they were one with the gangs, that was one of their criticisms of the Muslims is that we weren't organized and we weren't doing anything. You know, so when you mentioned that, that just kind of struck a nerve. And I just, you know, I felt I had to chime in on that, you know.
Do you know all of them brothers was in the community from all those,
Wow.
and they were all Muslim.
Wow.
Their
Wow.
sons were
Wow.
in there. And
Yeah.
so a lot of them that was in that environment, I know all of them, right?
Yeah.
I was the imam in that environment. I understand. And we used to have long talks because it's a long time. You know, when you in those situations, it's kind of all you got. We become a family. You know what I mean? And when you surround around a bunch of gangs, you have to be like that.
Right.
Because you got skinheads, you got, and in 97, 98, there was a lot of fighting and killing between the Muslims and the Aryan Nation in the penitentiaries. It was like crazy during those. I remember calling home, and my brother's here. He's online. I used to, because he was home at that time. I used to be like, if I don't call home, I'm dead. That's how bad it was. If you don't hear from me, I'm dead. So in that environment, you sort of see what these young brothers who don't have that connection outside, they're looking for. That protection you're talking about, that the girl has, that the boy, that guidance, they find that in the gang.
Yes.
When I went to that masjid, and I didn't pay attention, the Friday I went for Jumu'ah, 3 young boys took Shahada. I didn't know. I just thought it was young boys taking Shahada, alhamdulillah. But so that's a pattern going on. When I went there, the first Jumu'ah in Ramadan, 3 young brothers, they was coming up like left, right, and they were together. I didn't know that it was a gang problem because these were good young brothers and hugging me and like, but the problem is we're not, because them brothers ain't that lost.
No.
It's the problem is we're not guiding them. Listen, I'm from Atlantic City. We don't know nothing but Muslim gangs, if you want to call them gangs. Like I said, we didn't call ourselves gangs. We from a neighborhood. In the drug trade, when I was coming up, the Muslims running stuff. All the major drug dealers in my neighborhood, in my area, were Muslim. And it was to the point that a Kafir can't get, like, we ain't letting no Kafir run no stuff, right? That was an attitude of people when I grew up, right? It's well known in my area. The biggest, unfortunately, even now, when a lot of the stuff happened, jokers get knocked off, they Muslim. That culture hasn't really changed.
Yeah.
So it's not something that's reserved to Philly or Chicago. It's all over.
Right.
But what we need, and I know growing up, it wasn't frowned upon, nor was there measures to change it. I think what we really want to address that issue, we have to get back, and people not going to like it, don't matter to me, because it's true. We need to get to Black-controlled Islam.
Mm-hmm.
It can be Ahl Sunnah, it can have all the knowledge, but we need Black images of men.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Men.
Yeah.
Not, and sometimes even when I give Jumu'ah here, people get kind of like, man, why are you hollering at us? Nah, we're in a crisis.
Yeah.
You're lazy. You don't want to be on security. You don't want to take things serious. Everything is, mashallah. La, you need to be active. Not just saying, inshallah, mashallah. You have some ikhtiyar yourself. You have a choice. You have istita'ah. You have ability. Get busy. But sometimes it's cool, and I don't like to say it like that. It's cool to be soft as a Muslim. And these young boys don't want no ice cream. They want ice. A big difference. But we'll just philosophize our way out of work. And we find that in every avenue. I don't want to work. I don't want no motion, as one of my brothers say. I just want to talk. But I don't want to do no work. And we got to change that attitude. And we'll philosophize, quote Quran and Sunnah, not to do no work. If you want to save them young people, you got to be brave enough to be like them. And I don't mean committing crime. They're in motion. Even if they're doing bad motion, they're in motion. And you standing still. That ain't going to work. They need to come and see when we used to control Islam, whether it was the nation, I'm talking about our narrative of what we thought was Islam, right. Whether it was the nation, whether it was Fuqara Jamaat, whether it was Darul Islam, whether it was MIB, whether it was the Ansars, whatever you wanted to call it, we had men.
We had Izzah. That's right. That's right.
Right?
That's right.
And now we've left that. And we're seeing it affect our youth because the women, unfortunately, even in our communities, are more reliable, more manly than the men.
And maybe some of the divorce would cut down if we stepped up and been men. I mean, we're quick to say, well, these sisters, man, blah, blah, blah. But I mean, let's face it. A lot of the sisters have had poor examples of men to look at. I mean, we brothers, we go into marriages relying on the women. So we perpetuate our own disrespect, not only from the women, but from the young people. Because to your point, Imam, this has become a lost art. I mean, again, for me, Islam was synonymous with masculinity. Islam with Imam Dawood and I talk about this daily. The brothers in the first, they had Izzah. They had, Siraj told a story years ago when he was selling Muhammad Speaks, and he said he went to a housing project in Brooklyn, and guy stared at him, and 30 seconds later shook his head. He said, I can't do it. I can't do it. I can't rob a Muslim. Because if I rob a Muslim, I know I'm going to have to leave this town. Give me some of them papers.
That's where those Futua guilds is needed, Imam Dawood.
Yeah,
initiate them.
Another story, and I came up on a type of discipline. I remember walking with my cousin, walking in front of Masjid Wali Muhammad on Linwood, and so much respect was commanded. Because see, this used to be temple number 1 under the nation. This was the first masjid that Imam Wafdi Muhammad renamed. We would walk on the opposite side of the street. I'm telling you, this is in the early 80s. Not only would the cars drive by, they would turn down their music, but people on the street would cross the street and not walk in front of the masjid and would stay silent and would not say anything. And Ustaz Shakir knows because he lived not too far away from there, to the extent that those brothers were there and those brothers would speak. And it's almost like all of the young brothers' backs would straighten up. That's the type of respect that those brothers commanded. And notice this is something also very interesting in the idiom of American English. And I say this all the time, is that we don't say he asked for respect. He requests respect. He begs respect. Someone commands respect. Real men through their disposition, through their posture, through what they were about, they command people's respect. That in of itself does more talking than words, right? And then that's really like what you mentioned, the Fatua guilds. This is the job of the day of us investing our time, talent, and treasure in dealing with these young folks, especially these young brothers. because alhamdulillah, thank God, and I know we've been on for a while, but that shooting in Philly, which by the way wasn't the only shooting in Philly that day. That's just the one shooting relating to Muslims in Philly that day. That wasn't the only shooting relating to Muslims that day in Philly on the Eid day. That those 3 people that were shot, that no one was killed. But can you imagine, a situation on Eid day or at a masjid? I mean, that's not even the first time. There's been shootouts at Germantown Masjid before back in the day. Imam pulled off of the minbar at gunpoint. I mean, but God forbid if this becomes a phenomenon and something to be acceptable within inside our community, as it's acceptable to have these types of shootings and these revenge crimes in the Black community in general, right? And that's why, going back to the beginning of our conversation, so I said it's really code red. Right. For Muslims who are Black in the United States of America, it's code red. Like, we're at an emergency situation right now, and really it should be time for all games, all pettiness. That needs to be cut out immediately.
And we definitely have to let me see how I'm gonna do this. Oh, is it this one? No. So come and think it. I'm sorry, Imam Dawood. I'm trying to adjust this, but it doesn't work. I'm not the expert at this. Where is it at? So we got this conference coming up. It's on our website, and we'll be advertising regular, because we look like we're going to expand these. It's a 4-day conference, an Islamic Unity Conference, and where we discuss our issues and how to unify in our issues. It is from July 11th to the 14th here in Atlantic City at the Waterfront Convention Center. It's online. The information is there, IslamicUnity.eventbrite.com. And daily we'll be updating you with information, and additional speakers and panels will be added. And also there is a code for discount hotels, and I'll give that out to y'all tomorrow and over the Black Imams Roundtable. So mark that date, July 11th through the 14th, 2024. One last question, and I know we got to go, but this is a serious question. And Imam Dawood, and I hope Ustaz Shakir, you can join us, because this is an important gathering, but we need all hands on deck to make it a complete success and to hit all the issues we can hit within that time, especially think tanks and workshops and meeting with one another, with leaders and influential people, stakeholders. We need to get it all in one whop while we can, inshallah. So I hope you would come and join us with that event if you are able. But one question I want both of y'all to address, since we've ended on this and we were talking about the youth. I often have talks with brothers, Muslim and non-Muslim, who would like to be mentors and role models for young African-American youth, but they often find a struggle with the mothers making those youth their babies and protecting them from real men. Give me your thoughts on that. Did you hear my question? Y'all understood it well?
Yeah.
Okay, give me your thoughts on that.
You want me to go, Imam, or you want to go ahead?
Bismillah, because your answer may suffice. Go ahead, beloved.
So, well, let me ask you these, Imam. Are these sisters part of a Jama'ah or part of a community?
Non-Muslims or Muslims?
Okay.
Let me give you the scenario.
Okay.
You got outstanding men
Right.
who have shown a track record of success in raising young black men, right?
Yeah.
I'll give you one.
Yeah.
Because me and my brother, we made a covenant in 1995. We were in a federal institution, and we were at lunchtime. We worked in Unicor. Unicor is like Federal Prison Industries, the slave ship inside the jail, right? That's a whole nother story. So we were back. One day he was going to leave, going to the state because he had a state bid to continue. And we said, this stops in our family right here. We the last ones. That was our covenant. So he left, and I still had had 5 more years to go, right? He went to the state, and I still had 5 more years in the feds to do. So we came home, and we did just that, right? The boys we had that were directly under our control, all of them successful. My son's a police officer, raising my grandson. He's married. My brother's son is a college graduate. He got a full ride basketball ship for Howard for 2 years or 3 years. He did in Howard, or 2. Then he went to Hampton. So they got this HU battle in my family because my niece is a Howard graduate. And he didn't raise a woman, a girl, young lady, and a son, both of them college graduates. You know, they're doing great. So we took the direct men, and my daughter's in college in her senior year in the HBCU, you know, so we had this in our family. This is the thing. But sometimes some of our family members that are males, because they're raised by their mothers, we're not able to reach. Sometimes because their mothers interfere, right? Because we were always like, with our boys, you're going to answer to both of us. So you always got this man element in your face all the time. But sometimes some of them, we couldn't reach them, couldn't save them, because the woman would protect them from men. So I made it a little bit more personal so you can follow me. But that happens often, even outside of my own family. Because sometimes when they're given that man, that kid can be saved. But when that woman is protecting, sometimes, like, that's my baby, he can never be made into a man. What's your thought?
Yeah, so I'll respond to something personally. So I remember when I was teaching one of my teaching assignments in Detroit, and I was working at a high school, and the football coach, couple of his students were in my class, and he was talking about how, you know, he was getting fed up, frustrated with the job. And he talked about how when his players would come to practice late, he would make them run laps as a form of discipline to teach them accountability, respect, you know, knowing about consequences and so forth. Their mothers would come up to the school cursing at him. I'm going to get your so-and-so arrested. That's my baby. It's too hot to be out here running laps. What's wrong with you? Blah, blah, blah. And he's like, I'm trying to mold him into a man, not just physically, but I'm trying to mold his psychology into knowing the value of accountability, integrity, and the consequences for your actions. So I say that to say is that women need to be made to understand that men raise men. I mean, I know a lot of the women, they have some trust issues, or they're still angry at their father, what have you, but men raise men. And they've done the best that they can do, but they're raising him from the perspective of a woman. And if you want a man to be a man, you want a boy to become a man, he has to be sharpened by a man, because a woman can't sharpen him. A woman can obviously assist in his development from her perspective, but it's a man who will help to develop him as a man. I mean, this is why in so many societies they had rites of passages for boys. And it's the men who initiate the rites of passages for boys. You teach a man how to hunt, how to get some money, and how to fight. And hopefully the psychology of how to deal with a woman and protect his family. And only men can do that.
So, in closing, I agree fully with that. It takes men to raise young males how to be men, because no matter how hard a woman tries, she can never be a man, right? And she can never show him what it means to walk this life as a man, especially as a black man in America, right? In saying that, there's two other points. Number one, some of us as men need to understand that our sisters do this as a protective mechanism. Many of our sisters have been abused. A lot of them have been, as Ustaz Shaker said, no, we know the percentage of young black girls who've been touched, been molested, didn't have a father in their life to really protect them. So there's a lot of trauma that has to be dealt with. So sometimes we understand that when our sisters act that way, overly protective of their sons, because they're scared of their sons getting abused, or there's counter transference of how they were molested or abused, and they're worried about their sons. That's number one, right? So we have to have a little empathy. And sisters who've been in a situation, and if any watching, and there's probably a chance percentagely that somebody who's watching this live right now, or watching this discussion live right now, was touched. Is highly likely. And someone who's watching it in its entirety, there's going to be somebody who's watching who was touched. There needs to be some counseling and some support to heal from that. Because all of the brothers are not the enemies, and most of us are not molesters, are going to harm you, right? The second point is that this is where we need teamwork with sisters, right? That when sisters in our community see other sisters who maybe didn't go through this, maybe did go through some things, that we need partnerships where sisters talk with other sisters or their friends and point them towards trusted people in our community who are role models that can help walk them through their fears and their anxieties. So many times a sister or women know how the certain touch points and know how to convince women of certain things that we men will never know and understand because we're not women. And this is why we need teamwork. And this is one of the deceptions of the shaitan. The shaitan wants the women to view the men as adu, or enemies or adversaries. And then the shaitan tries to get us men to see our women as the enemies or adversaries. This is all shaitan, right? So we have to, if we're going to do anything to help our community, we have to be awliya of each other, as the Quran says. Believing men and believing women, they're awliya, they're protectors of one another, of their sacred interests and trusts, right? So this is why I would say to the brothers, it is true that we have some sisters who are part of the problem and block things and will disrespect male authority. But there's some of our sisters who do it out of real trauma, out of protection. They themselves have been abused, they've been molested, right? And then we also need sisters to help in partnership with the brothers in pointing towards some of these positive activities and things that are going on. And Allah knows best.
And just if somebody asks a serious question, that are there men that would take other people's children? There are men that are looking to help raise black men. The problem is we need to connect the dots, and that's where the village comes in, right? Because we tend to see things one-dimensional, but every coin has two sides. So just like you see that negative side, there's the positive side that you need to look for too. So just as you see men that are no good, there are men that are real good. But let me explain something to our sisters. A good man is not going to waste his time on someone that doesn't respect his goodness. He would rather take that energy and put it where his goodness and his value is appreciated. And this goes into this whole conversation of a high value man. So if you want a good man to engage your child, you need to value and appreciate and respect that goodness. He doesn't have time, if he's really a good man, to waste that valuable energy where it's not appreciated and valued. So just make sure when you want that type of man in the life of your child, that you're willing to give him the room to be a man to that child. And that first thing is first, you have to trust him and remove yourself as an impediment to him building that young man to a positive, respected man. That's just, I'm speaking from a side of men who really want to help. But you have to give them access and appreciate that they want to help and give it to them. I'm just, that's something, because I know a lot of men who want to help, but they need that to do the work.
And also, too, sisters, if a sister comes to a brother, your husband, it's a single sister, and has a son and looking for mentorship and asks questions, don't have it as your reflex response that she's so-called trying to take your man from you. I just have to say that, because I've also seen that, as a situation where sometimes wives will get a little touchy and get a little bit on edge when situations like that present themselves, and think that, they think that the sister is trying to, slide in and get like the second, third, or fourth position. And it's not always the case. So let's, we one of the traits of a believer, and this is something else, we could keep going on and on, right? But one of the things that Shaitan wants to instill in us, I'll start with this because it's the opposite, it's trait of the believer. But Shaitan wants to instill in us sul dhun, that we start having a bad opinion of the Muslims or the believers, where in fact a trait of good character is having husnul dhun, good opinion. First, having a good opinion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We're also supposed to be, unless proven otherwise. We show caution, right? We don't throw caution to the wind, but we're supposed to start off with having a good opinion of our sister and a good opinion of our brother, instead of thinking that, the sister's coming for mentorship for her son, and then, and she thinks, and jump to the conclusion that the sister is a so-called potential home wrecker. Like, we have to resist that type of attitude.
So let's have some final closeout words, and I'll leave that to y'all. I don't have any. And inshallah, one of y'all will close us out with dua.
My closing comments is, buy our brother's book. And some of you have logged on late. I saw a few of you all commenting late. The enemy within, why we Black Americans must confront ourselves. Let's support our brother's book, Ustad Shakir. May Allah preserve him. This is a valuable read. It's very educational and enjoyable, and it's also not just for Muslims. I bought several copies. I've given a copy to my father, to my stepfather. I've mailed it to a few other people, so you can get more than one copy. But I've given it to people who aren't Muslims, right? So let's support our brother, and as we discussed before, we have broad community initiatives that need to be supported, and in that we need to support each other as individuals, and that's how we're going to grow. We have broad macro issues that need to be addressed, and then we have micro support that we need to support for brothers. And the brother spent a decade writing this book and researching this book. And I believe that I believe that the book and he personally is worthy of our support. So I conclude with that.
Your mic is on mute.
SubhanAllah, I just want to say again, Jazakallah khairan, Imam Amin Muhammad and Imam Dawood, for having me on. I'm honored. I'm so thankful to be a part of this, and I just wanted to echo, your two sentiments, as well as I've read some of the comments that, this is code red. I mean, we're in a state of crisis, and that no one is coming to save us but us. And but the irony, and just to follow up on both of your comments, is that it is a crisis, but we have what many other Muslims in many other parts of the world don't have. We actually have the freedom to address our issues unencumbered or unhindered by interference from any number of issues affecting Muslims in other parts of the world. So while we do have, it is a code red, we also have to thank Allah for the environment that we're in that allows us to even have this discussion. Because in many parts of the Muslim Ummah, we couldn't even have this discussion. So, again, keeping it in perspective, taking advantage of what we have. And as Imam Amin mentioned early in the broadcast, is we all have gifts. We all have gifts. We all have talents. And let's utilize those talents and gifts to get involved and improve our condition.
So, and we have an offer to actually come to the Philadelphia Masjid to assist, to cooperate with them. It's an open invitation for us, because they are actually, and this was prior to this incident, they are actively working on helping the youth. When I was there, before I gave the Jumu'ah khutbah, they had Freeway, the rapper. They had him in the office. I know you do what you do, but we need you to spend some time with the youth and start giving them some positive, talk with them, try to help in which way you can. I was there witnessing. I was in the office with them, and that was a concern of reaching the youth. And at Asr time, they had a bunch of youth in the masjid, right? Trying to work with them. They're trying. And that community are all elders. And let's say this, I know them very well, right? And the main one who's running that masjid in terms of organization, administration, me and him go way back. Like we understand. So, and they're open to network, to dialogue, to cooperate, to help fix their youth and build them up and to make them not only good Muslims, but good citizens in the society and men. And they have that. So throughout the country, we need to, and we talked about this, that we need to connect with one another, support one another, encourage one another, share with one another, and they're open for that. So April 27th, I don't have the actual times. If you're wherever you're at, they're going back in that park and they're going to have all the resources available for those youth in the community. That's April 27th. What is April 27th? That's a Saturday?
Saturday.
Yes, Saturday. So Saturday, April 27th, at the same location, the park across from Philadelphia Masjid, they're going to gather again with all the resources that are needed in the community. So those who are available around, and especially in the Philadelphia, please go support that effort. And inshallah, we'll share the information later on coming up to that. May Allah make it easy for all of us. Imam, can you close us out with dua?
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه يا مقلب القلوب ثابت قلوبنا على دينك ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار اللهم طهر قلوبنا من الرياء والنفاق اللهم نور قلوبنا يا Allah, Ya Allah, Ya Ahmar Rahimeen. We ask you, Ya Allah, by the right of Al-Habib al-Mustafa sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, to heal our hearts, Ya Allah, to heal our community, Ya Allah. We ask you, Ya Allah, to grant us beneficial knowledge, and we seek refuge with you from knowledge which has no benefit. We ask you, Ya Allah, to set affairs right of the Muslim youth. Allahumma aslih shabab al-Muslimin. We ask you, Ya Allah, to set the affairs right of the Muslim youth. Ya Allah, we ask you to set the affairs right of the Muslim youth. Ya Rabbil Alameen. In Philadelphia, Detroit, and all throughout these United States of America, Ya Allah. We ask you, Ya Allah, to rid our psyches, to rid ourselves of self-hate and of inferiority complexes, Ya Rabbil Alameen. We ask you, Ya Allah, Ya Allah, Ya Ahmar Rahimeen, Ya Ahmar Rahimeen, Ya Ahmar Rahimeen, Faraj al-Muslimin. We ask you, Ya Allah, to give swift relief to Muslim brothers and sisters who are suffering all throughout this world, Ya Allah. And we ask this by the right of your Habib, Mustafa Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Al-Fatiha.
Inshallah, we'll see you tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock for our regularly scheduled classes. We're back, inshallah, and we'll see you tomorrow. Barakallahu bikum. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum salam.
Don't leave 1 second. We switch.